in holiday mood. It's an interesting thing. It is a holiday season. Granted, it's a kind of a holiday where we should be working or focusing on our emancipation struggles, because the two things are literally overlapping this year, where it's Labor Day. Well, Labor Day usually is what, on the 23rd? So, but it's now on the 25th, because I think the 23rd was when, Saturday? No, but today's Sunday. Yeah. There you go. So it's on the 25th, it's Monday, so a lot of the Labor Day activities will be happening tomorrow, although we've had some that have started, because we've seen, for example, the Bob and Rita Marley Foundation doing quite a bit of work cleaning up the beaches, and I know there are others who are involved in just doing Labor Day work across Jamaica. So thank you so much for the work that you're continuing to do, that you're always doing, as you get prepared for Labor Day and for Africa Day. Africa Day, of course, is tomorrow also, the 25th. So thank you so much for joining us inside of the Africa Forum once again on the 107s, 107.1, all the way to 107.9. Yesterday marked 194 years since the public assassination of Baba Sam Sharpe. May 23, 1832. Remember that date? Baba Sam Sharpe was just 31 years old. He was assassinated. He was executed in the parade area of Montego Bay, St. James. He led the Emancipation Wars, 1831-32. And Baba Sam Sharpe, along with those who fought for our freedom, liberation in the Emancipation Wars, so many were assassinated, executed, murdered, hung, killed, you name it, imprisoned, tortured, violently tortured, deported, transported, and the story goes on. A luta continua, a vittoria is certa. The struggle continues, but victory is certain. Baba Sam Sharpe was an organizer and a strategist of 1831. Some people call it the Christmas Rebellion. We know it's the Emancipation Wars, but just so you know what we're talking about, he became a martyr for African liberation, for black liberation, and self-determination. We remember him this morning, remember him and recall him, and to say, I am Sam Sharpe. A luta continua. The promise of emancipation is still not yet fully realized as we recall and remember Sam Sharpe. I found it interesting that I watched as government ministers on both sides of the aisle yesterday laid wreath in Sam Sharpe's name, for Sam Sharpe, at his memorial at Heroes Park. And it was done with so much pomp and pageantry and in such a somber mood. And I thought to myself, they are laying wreaths for Sam Sharpe, who fought against oppression, against a system of oppression that they still fight to keep in place. Sam Sharpe fought against the British monarchy. Sam Sharpe fought against England as the head of state of Jamaica. Sam Sharpe fought against English in Parliament. Sam Sharpe fought against the mace. Sam Sharpe rebelled against oppression, against any form of imperialism, against empire. And yesterday, politicians laid wreaths to Sam Sharpe. They've called him and named him a national hero. And yet, those who fight against a system of oppression, empire, imperialism, today, in Sam Sharpe's name, are vilified. And if you're not careful, you can be accused of that, of doing something illegal, and you can be charged too in some cases. And that That right there is the conundrum. That right there is a conundrum. Because we honor the heroes of revolution and liberation, and we calcify them, calcification, and we call them national heroes, and we lay wreaths to them. Paul Bogle, Baba Paul Bogle, who led the wars in St. Thomas, the Morant Bay War in St. Thomas, against imperialism, empire, oppression, for liberation. We lay wreaths to them. We honor them. We have expunged their names, their records. And yet here we are. We have somehow managed to put them in a box by themselves, and they belong somewhere else. They certainly, and what they did, do not belong in this time. And that is the enigma. It's a conundrum within an enigma, wrapped up in a riddle. I don't know. They have somehow bent themselves into pretzels just to ensure that those of us who participate in liberationary struggles against imperialism, empire, and oppression, that even if we call upon the names of Sam Sharpe and Baba Paul Bogle and Queen Nanny, Nana of the Maroons, that even if we do that, we're still accused of breaking the law. And yet Sam Sharpe had to break the law to lead the wars, 1831, 1832, emancipation wars. Paul Bogle had to break the law to lead the wars for liberation with the epicenter being in St. Thomas, Morant Bay. Letitia Gohegan, who took the first stone in the Morant Bay War, who threw the first stone in the Morant Bay War. Letitia Gohegan had to break the law for liberation. This is we're going to have to face the isness of things. It is what it is, and it is the isness of things that we're going to have to begin to ask ourselves about where we are. And even as they say, Sam Sharpe said, I would rather die upon yonder gallows than live in slavery. That for those of us who say, I'd rather die upon yonder gallows than live in oppression, what becomes of us? Ironically, today, the black majority remain shackled in mental slavery, economic slavery, structural violence, poverty, illiteracy, and I didn't want to use that word, but it's there, you know. It is what it is. Oblivious to our history, to our culture, to our identity. As of May 21, 2026, Indicom recorded 131 fatal shootings by members of the security forces in Jamaica. Let that sink in. Last year I talked about the 311 and got a terrible backlash on that. But let that sink in. Let that sink in. High percentage of fatalities. High percentage. And some of these are tied to planned operations, if not all of them. And you wonder, how come? They say these are essential for national security. But Buju, our sister, is dead. And it don't matter how you spin it. Our sister from Montego Bay, Buju, it doesn't matter which political party she belongs to. It doesn't matter what her background is. We have all seen the video. And at the time of the murder, Buju was not a threat to anyone, but Buju is dead. Our sister Buju is dead. And that's the bottom line. We can talk around this all we can, but Buju is dead. Our 4-year-old fat boy, that young 4-year-old that Leticia Bohatsing has been talking about in this space, is dead. Doesn't matter how you spin this. Both killed in Granville, St. James. They are dead. Or their 18-year-old cousin is dead. Don't matter how you spin it, they're dead. And Indicom is telling us that as of May 21, 2026, 131 fatal shootings by members of the security forces in Jamaica. That is not a joke business. That is not something to get tribal about. That is not something to get partisan about. That is for us to stop and say, what in the name of everything that is good and faithful is happening on our island in Jamaica? Because the security forces on the one hand and the criminals on the other hand, and we are wrapped up in a civil war, and we are wrapped up in what is shaping up to be a genocide. We have more people dying in Jamaica at the hand of the security forces over a certain period of time than dying in Lebanon, and on some days in Gaza, and on some days in Iran. This is not a joke business. The security forces came out of the Morant Bay War. This is what Paul Bogle was fighting against. The security forces, the JCF, is an answer to what is happening, what happened during the Morant Bay War. The answer was black people, the masses of the people, will no longer rise up against oppression and empire and imperialism and lack of land, landlessness, and denied access to water, land, food, rivers. That was the fight just for dignity and decency during the Morant Bay War. That was the fight. And out of the Morant Bay War came the Jamaica Constabulary Force. And the reason for that was that this would never happen again. The masses of the Jamaican people will never rise up against a system again. And that is the bottom line. Because they said it after the Morant Bay War, after they executed Paul Bogle. And in this time, they say, meet your God or your maker. They say, shoot and ask later. So here we are. Here we are. 194 years since 1831. Since Sam Sharpe was executed. And the people of Jamaica are still being executed. Before we go to our very special guests who I know are standing by, just to remind you, because we mentioned it briefly last week just as I was exiting because we didn't remember it, we're going to be having a deep dive, a very deep conversation, reasoning with Muta Baruka at Reanuva Village in St. Mary next week, Sunday, beginning around about 12 o'clock. We start things off. The reasoning will start on about 1 o'clock. And this is within the context of how we begin to change the narrative. We talked to Muta, who is a philosopher, a conscious thinker, a wise sage, looking at his own personal philosophy, talking about some of the issues that both of us raise in these spaces all the time, but to move the not to keep kicking the can down the road, but to move from speech into action, because first comes thought, then speech, then action. How do we move along this trajectory in a positive way? How do we begin to change the narrative? How do we shift the paradigm? What philosophies are in place for us to do that? And as a philosopher who has been talking about these issues, and not just talking, but doing over many, many years, we're going to be talking to Muta Baruka through his lens, his philosophical lens, deep thinking, the way of our ancestors. And that will be happening at the Reunion Village in St. Mary. I will be having that conversation with Muta, will be in deep reasoning. And I said to Muta, it is one of those chats that I don't think you've ever had. And we have had among ourselves and between us these reasonings from time to time. But because we ourselves are broadcasters, we're usually asking other people's questions. So for next week, Sunday, we're going to be having a deep reasoning with Muta Baruka, hearing his thoughts, his philosophies, and his knowledge system, which is an African knowledge system. Of course, it's 582 hertz live. We're calling it 582 because 582 is vibrating on a whole different frequency. 582 is shifting the paradigm. 582 is understanding that we are in a critical moment and our thoughts, our actions can shift the paradigm. And this is why these series that are about, take me off of this, so you know, look like me. That is how, I'm talking for those who are looking at YouTube, right? I know that's what AI does to thing, and I had to ensure that Muta looked good. So Muta, it kept changing one of us, you know. Either me or Muta, we cannot look the same. So anyway, I'm going to be. But we'll be having this reasoning, deep reasoning with Muta Baruka at Reunion Village. It is more than the usual events. We're talking about frequency, energy, frequency, vibration. And we think that as we gather in a space where the river meets the sea, because this is exactly where the river meets the sea, the Rio Nuevo opens into the sea. And this is a place also where all of our ancestors have been. And we'll talk about that later on. I'll tell you much more about this. But the date is May 31. So that's next week, Sunday. And I'm inviting you. Please join us there. We're also going to have a question and answer segment. So once the reasoning is finished with Muta, then Muta will take questions from you. Join us at Reunion Village next week, Sunday, between 12 noon and on about 3, 4 o'clock. All right? Okay, let's go to the... I'll tell you more about this before the program is over. Peter will be there too, right, Peter? There you go. See it there? Peter got did it. That means you know it's a live stream. I mean, I don't know if you're live streaming it yet, but Peter got did it, and that's the important thing. Now, I know that you have heard that Senator Albin Hill, Minister of Industry, Investment and Commerce, has told the Parliament Standing Finance Committee that their amendments to the CLA, the Cannabis Licensing Bill Authority, that they're beginning to issue licenses, permits and authorizations more effectively. He's also explained that fees for licenses and permits would be waived for the first 2 years under the revised framework. And the minister also said the government intends to reduce regulatory requirements for farmers cultivating under 2 acres of ganja in an effort to make legal participation easier for small operators. So there's a whole lot that was said there. What we're going to be doing this morning is talking to members of the Ganja Growers and Producers Association here in Jamaica. They have welcomed the proposed amendments to Jamaica's cannabis licensing regulations. They have described them as an important step toward making the industry more inclusive for small and traditional farmers. So joining us by Zoom is the president of the Ganja Growers and Producers Association of Jamaica, the GGPAJ, Maurice Ellis, the program director of the Ganja Growers and Producers Association, Vicky Hanson, an educator, a ganja advocate, and president of the St. Anne Growers and Producers Association, Laxdeen Anderson, and from the EABIC Church of Salvation, Roots and Liberty, priest Dave Lee, and we're going to be talking to them about some of these issues, but also to go looking back to go forward. Sankofa Ing, because the GGPAJ has been around for quite a while. I think from 2014. I think in 2014 it was called the Future. I think Future was in the name, because I have been talking to the organization, the group, over all these years, and I know it's from 2014 that this started, and I think it started on the back of what happened to Mario Dean, if I remember correctly. They can correct me on that. So I'm not seeing them, but I'm sure that my special guests are already here. So let me know when we're ready for them, Peter. All right, let me see who is there with us. Are you hearing me? Anyone at all? Because I know I saw you earlier. I'm not seeing you now, though. No?
Greetings.
Greetings.
Hello. How are you?
Okay, thank you so much. You're all here. Greetings. So let me just do the roll call. All right. President Maurice Ellis, are you with us?
Yes, good morning.
Okay.
Thank you for having me this morning.
All right, thank you so much. Vicky Hansen, my sister, are you there?
Good morning, sister. I am here.
Good to have you in the place. Lax Dean Anderson, are you there?
Greetings, Prof. Kabul. Yes,
Greetings, my brother.
I'm very much here.
Greetings, Priest Dave Lee, are you there? And now I'm doing the roll call. Priest, are you there? EABIC, Church of Salvation, Roots and Liberty. All right, so we're not hearing Priest Dave Lee. But I want to start with you, my sister Vicky Hansen, because I think you have a very good idea. I recall you from being around within this, if not the group, but definitely within the system for a very long time. How did the GGPAJ start, the Ganja Growers and Producers Association? Because I seem to remember that early out in the day, I think right on the heels of the Mario Dean murder in prison, that there was a response to that I think ultimately mushroomed into.
You're correct, Sister
Okay.
Kabul. You are. I smiled when I heard you giving the history in our name and so on.
Yes.
But you are indeed correct. We started out long before 2014 too. From early 2011-12, when we realized there was a high intention in terms of the ganja usage, and you had many persons just being arbitrarily arrested for spliff. And this is coming historically. Work was done by Professor Barry Chavans,
Yes.
and that commission,
Yes.
looking at ganja and how it was treated.
Mm-hmm.
Now, so we started out as future ganja growers and producers. We did have the word future, and we did that because we didn't want to implicate persons who were then in the industry, because at that time they ran the risk of being arrested.
Mm-hmm.
So we added the word future because we were saying, all right, we aren't for the official optics, and so, but what triggered further action was the Mario Dean incident with this young man who he was a professional heading to his job to do work, and because at the time ganja was not permitted or was prohibited in all its form and usage, he was arrested under the guise of being in possession of a spliff.
Yes.
And we all knew what happened after. So that was a trigger for us to get to the decriminalization, because we said, listen, this is a very productive Jamaican who was on his way to being productive and contributing to our society.
Yes.
And because of this prohibition of the plant and its usage, he was arrested and lost his life. So we lost a very productive Jamaican. So that helped to strengthen our arguments for decriminalization and use of ganja in its various forms.
And Maurice Ellis, we're looking at how many years now? It's over a decade, almost 2 decades, if not over 2 decades, isn't it? I mean, this is quite some time. What is the talk to me about how it has grown, the GGPAJ, in terms of recognizing and also achieving some of the benchmark that you had set, that the organization itself had set over time, from futures into the amendments we're hearing about now.
Okay, correct. It has been over a decade, and the association has evolved. We started out strong in the beginning, strong advocacy, with a lot of support from local stakeholders as well as international stakeholders. Over the years, we've seen, the GGPAJ has advocated for a lot of things, including the decriminalization, as well as for a regulated and standards body to be set up for the cannabis industry. Now, we have done that. We've assisted and participated in creating the regulating body, which is now known as the Cannabis Licensing Authority. Also, we've worked with the Bureau of Standards of Jamaica in order to create standards that applies directly to cannabis in all its forms, from cultivation, from seed to sale, right? So you're talking about, yes, cultivation, as well as processing, as well as retail sales, packaging, labeling, all that sort of stuff. Because before that, there were no standards applied to cannabis or to ganja,
Yes.
right? So we've managed to do that. Now, over the years, especially post-COVID, we've seen, the membership start to wane.
Maurice, you were saying outside on the back of a COVID that other challenges developed, and there were. I interrupted you there. Tell us about that. The point you were making regarding COVID.
Correct. We saw the membership wane at that point. We had a number of things planned, but because of the different protocols that we had to follow for COVID, we had to step back on a number of things because a lot of those things our meetings were in-person meetings. So coming out of COVID, there was a change in the leadership, and unfortunately, our past president, Mr.
Crawford.
Dickie Crawford, had developed some medical conditions, and as such, the association started to seek out a president, which is, how I, effectively became president after being elected by the association, the members of the association, the executive. So and since then we've had several meetings. Recently, I'll just fast forward to where we are now, 2026. We've had our first engagement with our members, as well as the NCDA, which is the National Council on Drug Abuse, which in my purview was a very, very good meeting. Vicky can definitely weigh in on that. We had great participation, great dialogue, because we always believe that resolve can come through dialogue.
We will definitely get back to that, because I think this is also one of the points that the RMO has raised in terms of the changes that Rastafari wants to see in how ganja is being defined generally, and that some of the laws or some of the rules and regulations, if you will, the protocols coming out through the licensing authority are vested in what's coming from the drug side of things. So, but let me go to Lax Dean, who is in St. Anne, who is the president of the St. Anne Ganja Growers and Producers Association. So, Laxdeen, at some point, and we watch this growth, right, where the Ganja Growers and Producers Association over time invited the different regions to become part of the bigger body. Tell me a little bit about how that started, the origin of that, and where you are now in terms of your membership within the GGPAJ.
Greetings, greetings, greetings again, Kabu, and pleasant good morning to our Running Africa family. Yeah, man. Hope you're hearing me.
We're hearing you. I'm not seeing any of you, but I'm hearing you.
Okay, great.
Yes.
Well, it's one of those mornings, well, usual mornings, as you know.
Yes.
I'm a Running Africa fan, member, family, family member. So I'm always up at this time,
Yes.
listening to
Yes.
Prof. Kabu. Of course, since decriminalization in 2015, the St. Anne Ganja Growers Association came into being around 2018, 2019, thereabout. And of course, I was first a member of the St. Mary Ganja Growers
I recall
Association.
that, yes.
Right. And then St. Anne became vacant. And I was asked by then program director Paul Burke to take a look at St. Anne and see how best I could, assist in organizing the parish.
Yes.
And of course, you know that St. Anne is the original Ganja parish. I must say that, original Ganja parish.
Yes.
So you have a lot of grassroots Ganja growers, as well as who would term as sacramental growers under the Rastafari community. Yeah, so since then, my main mode of operandi was public relations and public education, because I felt that, as part of the bigger body in terms of the GGPAJ association, national association, I felt that what needed to be done as an educator was to, basically share with the public what are the true facts, benefits, and uses of this plan. Because, of course, ganja has been criminalized and demonized and all kinds of things. So with the church and school, etc., a lot of persons still had, certain myths carrying with them. So, of course, we had Rebel Salute in the parish. So that was a great opportunity for us to partner with Rebel Salute through what they call the herb curve. I'm sure you're aware of that, because usually IRFM is at the gates
we've been there
of the herb curve.
Yeah, I have broadcast since Rebel Salute started until,
Yes.
we have broadcast live from the herb curve and spoken to so many people there.
Right, because I'm always I'm usually there, and I'm always present to make sure that at least our parish, is well represented.
But let me ask you,
we have had several other engagements, especially, as you know, International Ganja Day 420.
Right.
We have partnered with Jacana over the years, since I think 2021 thereabout. So we have had like 3-4 years.
Long and short, very active in St. Anne. St. Anne is very active. So I've noticed that myself. All right, but the challenges exist, and I know Maurice mentioned just now the meeting that the GGAJ had, and that was a pretty good meeting. I know he's deferring to Vicky Hansen on it to talk a little bit more about it. So Vicky, I'll throw it to you. Tell us about that meeting and what came out of it.
Yeah. So let me step back before going directly into that meeting. What we have been trying to do, as Maurice indicated, we have had a transition of leadership. So you'll find I have replaced Paul Burke, but before you had Orville Silvera, Paul Burke, Nicky Crawford. So in that transition and after the COVID, we have made a conscious effort to dialogue with members of the industry or members who are organizations and agencies that impact how the industry is developed. Now, NCDA, National Council for
on Drug Abuse,
on Drugs, is a critical partner because they help to shape and have helped to shape the message around ganja from the prohibition stage.
Yes.
You know, the whole argument of ganja abuse and misuse and all of that. So we thought that it was prudent that we dialogue with them. And this actually came out of a concern raised by one of our vice presidents, Mr. Errol Orton. And let me pause. We do have 4 vice presidents across the region. We have Errol Orton in St. Mary
Morning,
and the
Jackie.
North, right?
Yes.
We have Rupert Walters in the St. Catherine region, and we also have Rory Liu, who is a licensee, a processor, and we have Mr. Andre Mackenzie, who is also a processor and represents some business element. So with that different lens, different experience in the group, we thought that it was prudent to sit with the National Council on Drug Abuse and CDA and help to shape the messaging that goes out there. So we're not, their message is prohibitive in some element, but we were more concerned that the industry must be seen as a viable option for Jamaicans, and the product itself must be seen as something that is culturally used across Jamaica from time immemorial. And as such, we wanted to ensure that we are at the table with these various agencies that put out messaging. It was a productive meeting because we like the NCDA, are concerned with the misuse of ganja. And so based on that, we have found common grounds on which we can communicate our messaging in the industry, because we do believe that a negative message in this industry will continue to lead to tension and how persons see the industry. As a matter of fact, that is part of our concern when it comes to the amendments. We are happy for these amendments because it brings into the space transitional permits, bring into the space persons who are locked out, who may not have the financial resources. And so it is broadening, and that the intent of GGPAJ from its inception was always from ground up to build an inclusive industry. And note I said from ground up, because this industry from its informal state was built by the ordinary Jamaicans, the Rasta man, the Maroons, the man in the community who recognized its value. I always use the example that my first interaction as a child with ganja was my father having that little bottle in the house with ganja, roots, all kind of roots, and white rum.
Pimento seed and white rum. It
And pimento seed and
period
white.
pain.
Every
And
Jamaican
it good for dengue fever, but anyway, we can go
Yes.
on and on. But most Jamaican households, especially those in rural Jamaica, would have grown up with that bottle, that flask.
Yes.
With all of that concoction. That was very good and tastes good. So, and this is why you're going back to grassroots, from the ground up.
Exactly,
Obviously,
from the ground up to build the industry. The industry is a ground up industry. It's
but that
built
is not
on the,
happening. But
on the
that has
backs
not
of
been
Jamaicans
happening.
going to jail.
But that has not been happening, and I want to come back to that. Let me just bring in Maurice, because I don't know if Priest Davely has joined us yet. But in the meantime, Maurice, the amendments, only in the interest of time, where I'm kind of rushing the interview along, I'll invite you all back, and if you'll come in the studio, it will be really great. We spent some 4 hours just going through all of this. Maurice, let's talk about the amendments and the GGAP coming out to saying to say that this is something you endorse, but obviously there are still questions. So let us talk about what the amendments are and what the questions that the GGPAJ are. What are the questions you have?
Well, I just want to just highlight the fact that when our CEO Vicky was highlighting our membership, we can't forget our secretary, our new corporate secretary, Janine Jarvis, who has been doing a really wonderful job
Morning,
in
Janine.
terms of coordinating a lot of our activities.
Brilliant.
Now, as it relates to the amendments, we have the community development program as well as the transitional program that we've been advocating for the past 10 years. In fact, when we were future ganja growers and producers, we had asked for an amnesty of up to 2 years in order to assist our members to get regulated in order to meet the requirements of the regulator. And as Vicky had mentioned, you know, this industry should have been built from the bottom up, but it started from the other end. And because of that, a lot of us were excluded from the industry, not being able to meet the erroneous requirements of the regulator
With,
at the time.
with deliberate barriers to access. Deliberate barriers to access. That was frightening.
There were barriers to access that the average Jamaican wouldn't have been able to meet, and still unable to meet. So we're looking forward to have further dialogue with the regulator in order to build out these new amendments, right? It's going to take some work. It needs some fine tuning, and we're prepared, prepared, we're ready to work with the regulator
So
in order to facilitate that.
So what are your major, 3 or 4 major concerns? I know there are many because I've been following this for a good while, but with the amendments on the table, what are your major concerns?
As we highlighted, as Vicky highlighted as well, in terms of the use, we want to encourage responsible use, right? Recently, within the last couple of weeks, the major thing that's been happening is we see law enforcement conducting a number of operations and raids on sacramental farms. I'm sorry that Priestley is not on the program just yet. He could actually speak more to this. However, over the past maybe 4 weeks, I've received a number of calls from him and other growers that, you know, between the JCF and the narcotics agents have been conducting raids, cutting down a number of plants, arresting some persons, even burning some of the material. So it creates a bit of confusion, especially when we have all these wonderful new amendments. We see where the president of the United States has even made calls
Yes.
for the rescheduling of ganja from Schedule 1 to Schedule 3.
That Jamaica has welcomed.
That we have welcomed, absolutely, right? So when we see our, you know, traditional farmers, our sacramental growers being ostracized, you know, to this day, it almost seems like we're taking, you know, 1 step forward and 2 steps back, and we need some clarity on that, because I remember briefly asking me last week, who is doing this?
Well, this is exactly what I was going to ask you. That where is the centralization of the what is said in Parliament, the response to what the United States is doing, the kind of partnerships with Canada and other private sector groups and individuals. How is it that Jamaica and Jamaicans seem to be left, even with all of this, left out still of tapping into whatever it is that they can benefit from economically? Where is the disconnect? What is happening here? Why has it gone on for so long? Vicky, you want to comment, and then Laxdeen?
Yeah, I think part of the challenge is, Sister Kabu, is that we have not been listened to as much. So it's as if we have been screaming at the wind. And so, for example, Prophet Greg, who is one of our members and part of our leadership core in being one of the treasurer, has always maintained that we need to define if the sacramental space can have a commercial component. And I think the problem is we have been asking and having these conversations. But as Maurice highlighted, there was the start of the industry was built from the top with persons who weren't familiar or who came into the space basically with a enforcement prohibitive kind of approach. And that cannot be used to build out an industry that you expect to be economically beneficial to the ordinary Jamaicans. I often use the analogy that how we started out is like a child that we're learning to creep, but you put the child in a corner of a room and box them in. The child does not explore, and so the child does not develop properly. And that is our ganja industry. So we have been caught up by some Caribbean countries, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Antigua, for example, who have surpassed us, who have a ganja industry that is inclusive of its Rastafari community, that they can trade and benefit from the economic element of it. And so at this point, while, as Maurice says, we appreciate the amendments, we want not just only to see amendments on the books and a nice PR around it, but we want to be a part of, and we have actually put ourselves in the position to be a part of the build out of the regulations and the rules and how these now should be implemented for the benefit of not just the industry players that are there now, but our Rastafari community groups or Maroon community groups, and so have an industry that is inclusive.
Because we now hear references to community cultivation model, and that on paper that looks good and sounds good. How does it translate into reality? Is this a turning point? Is this sufficient to address the structural exclusion of the masses then?
I would say it's the beginning of a turning point. It's the beginning. The proof of the cake is in the eating, because now we'll see how is this. So yes, you have. So a question came up from our consultation and meetings with our St. Catherine group. And one question was, will the sacramental space be also permitted and established in a way that they can have commercial licenses in that space as well? And these are some of the issues that we are now going around our various chapters and trying to have coming from the community what they would like to see happening in the space.
Laxine, was that you coming in just now, or was it?
Yes,
Yeah, go
I
ahead.
just wanted to add to what Vicky and Maurice is saying, is that we would like to see the dangerous, that ganja be removed from the Dangerous Drugs Act, and a more softer, more amicable act be created. For example, the Ganja Act instead of saying the dangerous. Because, of course, when you talk about sacrament, it's an insult, it's a disrespect to us as Rastafarians and those who consider the plant a sacrament. Because, just having it under the Dangerous Drugs Act make people wonder if we're serious about, really developing this industry. Because this industry, can transform
How does it?
Jamaica,
How
when you
does it
talk
classify?
about every household having the opportunity to grow 5 plants, do you know how much pound 5 plants, if you grow it properly, can, give to a family, to an household? It's a serious issue, and as Maurice and Vicky pointed out, we need to take ganja where it ought to be, from the grassroots up, because, it was the grassroots
We've been
people who
saying
suffered,
we've
you
been
know.
saying that for so long, though. This is what bothers me, is that is the cry. I think everybody was involved, from the ganja growers and producers and all the other groups. I mean, you've all been saying this for the very longest while. I remember one of the persons who was saying that to was Delano Franklin. Not Franklin, Delano, Steve Wright.
Steve Wright,
And,
yes.
and he was part of the Future Growers, wasn't he? He was part of the Future Growers. I'm thinking now that he's in a position to help to move that along. 10 minutes, I probably just throw it to you to ask you or to answer whether or not Jamaica can protect its ganja heritage. But also, while you're doing that, to bear in mind what ought to identify one of the most serious challenges. And I want to throw in banking. I'm not sure if things have changed with if ganja growers are able to go walk into a bank in Jamaica and bank from your produce. So let's go there. I'll start with you, my sister Vicky.
Yeah, thank you for that. So let me answer the latter question first. We still have a challenge with banking. That is still a real problem for many of our licensees themselves, who have found creative ways around the issues. So it is a matter that GGPAJ will try, and we will remain at the table with the minister, now that you mention it, Delano Steve Wright, who was a part of and understand the more intricate matters within the industry. We hope to have dialogue with him on that matter, and also with the banking sector, which we would love to engage, especially now that there is a shift in the US from a Schedule 1 to a Schedule 3. So we will continue to push on that. Our heritage, ganja is a part of the Jamaicans' lived experience. I don't know any Jamaican who would not have come in contact with and have had some relationship with ganja. And as such, we do believe that there is space, a lot of space, for not just improvement, but for inclusion of these traditional participants. Luxdean mentioned it earlier, that we are pushing not for a ganja industry that is regulated by a Dangerous Drugs Act, but for an industry that is regulated by a Ganja Industry Act, which would include the cultural use of the plant, the cultural spaces and communities that help to build the brand of this plant. And like one of our members, Sister Maxine and Prophet Greg would say, the brand Jamaica is known because of ganja, and the relationships are intertwined.
True.
So we want to build an industry and get an act that deal with the holistic development of Jamaica's ganja industry, not a Dangerous Drugs Act that we're tacked onto, and that you have police use from time to time to go into our spaces, to abuse community, to destroy their assets, because ganja is an asset. If you look at the work, and Maurice will tell you, the investment that these communities make in their ganja cultivation, and to watch someone step in with brute force and chop and burn your investment, your hard-earned work in the hot sun or in your herb house or wherever. It is really a travesty. And so GGPAJ, Sister Kabu, is moving to ensure that we end up with an industry that is outside of a prohibitive framework, but that also allows for cultural use and for economic development of our communities and our members of society.
Thank you so much. Laxdeen, can Jamaica control or even save its ganja heritage?
Most definitely, Kabu, as Vicky highlighted, heritage. Heritage is important, you know. When you talk about heritage, you talk about roots. And ganja is fully rooted in this space called Jamaica. And that is why globally, people come to Jamaica because of our ganja. Our ganja seems to take them to what we call airy heights, you know. So I'm telling you that, you know, where ganja is concerned in Jamaica, it can only go forward and upward because more and more Jamaicans are engaging, are consuming the herb. I'm in the streets, you know, Kabu, and I can tell you, man, this ganja industry just needs the right leadership and the right messaging because ganja can transform lives in
All right, let me go
Jamaica.
to.
So definitely,
Thank you.
it is something that will grow and build.
And can be protected. I'll throw the
And
question to you, Maurice. Can Jamaica protect its ganja heritage? And if you will, address. I know Vicky did the banking situation, but if it's not the banking, that's a one critical thing for you. Just throw what the one critical thing is.
Absolutely. Jamaica has a strong brand and does have a strong cultural heritage in the production of ganja, and it will never stop. What we seek to do is formalize it and ensure that our farmers follow the chain of custody that will apply. Right, as it relates to banking, it's just a matter of time. Based on the changing landscape and the evolution of the industry locally and internationally. So, I mean, over the years, we've, you know, had several meetings, dialogues with the you know, former BOJ president, and those meetings were encouraging, and we learned a lot about how you know, money actually moves, how the BOJ views cannabis, and at that time there wasn't you know, a problem in terms of how the BOJ president viewed cannabis. It was actually related to the commercial banks and their you know, banking relationships as it relates to the Safe Banking Act. So yes, long and short of it is we're hoping to see changes in the banking situation, so depositors can deposit money, right, our stakeholders, and you know, that will speak to commerce, right, because without banking there's no commerce. So we're within you know, I believe the next 12 to 18, maybe 24 months, we should see some positive changes in that regard.
We're looking out for that. It's moving pretty slowly, but moving nonetheless. I invite you back on the program to come into the studio, and we spend a much longer time looking at this issue because it is critical and it cannot be discussed in 45 minutes. They're just so we've just barely just grazed the surface. So I invite you to come in the studio and we put aside the entire program for the conversation. Thank you so much. And by the way,
we'll be happy to do that, Sister
I'm looking
Kabu.
forward to it. And by the way, we have a project going here, the Africa Forum, along with the House of Seba, looking at the conscious use of ganja. So we would want to talk to you about that also to see how you can assist along the way. But this is basically...
We would love to coordinate with you.
Yes, the House of Siva spearheading that along with myself inside of the Africa Forum. All right, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Sister Vicky. Hanson. Thank you so much, my brother Maurice Ellis. Thank you so much, my brother Laxdeen Anderson. And next time, I hope we have Priest Greg or Baba Greg or Priest Lee, because we need that element. Thank you both. All right, we're back with you inside of the Africa Forum. This is Running Africa. And just before we go to our next very special guest, we're going to go to part 2 of our discussion on African indigenous knowledge systems. You might have heard by now, I'm sure, that Senegal, there is a situation developing there where the president of Senegal, Faye, has literally ousted the prime minister of Senegal, Sonko, and this has created an upheaval in Senegal right now. If you remember, the background to all of this is that the Diomaye Faye became the president of Senegal a few years ago, and we celebrated that in this space because he came out of the party of Sonko. Sonko is a Pan-African, but Sonko was imprisoned and charged. I think Faye himself was in prison, but I think the charge on Sonko meant that he couldn't run for president, and so Sonko supported and put up for President Faye, Diomaye Faye. So they're from the very same party, and they are and have been comrades, literally, in terms of Pan-Africanism, anti-imperialism, anti-Francophone Africa, anti-imperialism, anti-IMF, anti-Bretton Woods Institution. In other words, being Garveyites in their thinking, whether or not they saw themselves as that, being Pan-African in their thinking, and Sonko himself supporting Traoré in Burkina Faso and the Sahel in a very serious way. Now, we saw recently that Faye was getting pretty close to Paris, and he was making lots of trips to Paris. And that, of course, would be in direct contradiction of everything that they both believe, both the Prime Minister and the President, with Sonko being the wind beneath his wings, that is Faye. And this is my own personal observation of the whole thing. Now, so Faye has fired Sonko.
Ousmane Sonko Diomaye yóbbu na ko pale xam ko lii day may Ousmane Sonko doon joo xam ne jamonoy Macky Sall sax bi amu ko lii la ñu xaar parce que woon nañ ko bu yàgg ndax nit moom bu fekkee da nga tàmm war rek waxkat ngay doon ñun nag ay gor lañ te Ousmane Sonko gor pur la tey ku ko dégg ni mu waxee assemblée nga xam ne gor pur moo doon wax.
They have rallied outside the home of Sonko in Dakar, and they have literally they're literally lifting him on their shoulders, because one of the things they're saying is, we do not want what Faye is pushing at us through France, because Faye somehow has been cozying up with Paris. That is the bottom line. It is what it is, and we have to call a spade a spade. It is a business of things. Al Jazeera is reporting there, if you look on your screens, just showing the supporters literally rallying outside the home of Sonko and talking about how the rift is deepening. I think, I know I said I don't want to carry any audio, but I think we do have a commentary. I don't know which audio we can carry now, but I think more is needed to be said about this. But one of the things we're watching,
Ousmane Sonko Diomaye yóbbu na ko pale xam ko lii day may Ousmane Sonko doon joo xam ne jamonoy Macky Sall sax bi amu ko
lii la ñu xaar parce que woon nañ ko bu yàgg ndax nit moom bu fekkee da nga tàmm war rek waxkat ngay doon ñun nag ay gor lañ te Ousmane Sonko gor pur la tey ku ko dégg ni mu waxee assemblée nga xam ne gor pur moo doon wax.
I saw him back and forthing from Senegal to Paris, and I saw that he was more in tune with Frank Francophone Africa, I mean, which is a term we don't like inside here, but with the little boy, Macron. And it is, that alone should have sent sent up a red flag. But Sonko has been talking about this, and he, as a Pan-African, as someone who champions the total liberation of Africa, the independence of Africa, within the vein of Mali, Burkina Faso, and Benin. And he is on that track, and Senegal was supposed to be the next country in line. Faye is taking it away from that into something that Burkina Faso and the Sahel has already given up, which is the colonization and the recolonization and the ongoing colonization of Africa by France. So this is a developing situation. I do not know where it is going to go. I hope that peace reigns in Senegal and that we can see somehow a resolution to this in quick order. We understand also that the entire cabinet has been dissolved. I'm not sure what is going to happen on the backside of that, but we're watching it. We're very, very concerned about what is happening in Senegal, and I'm very disappointed in Diomaye Faye. Very, very disappointed. As are the people of Senegal, of course, because you see what's happening there in Senegal. I'm joined now by my next very special guest, my brother Derek Duru Ofodirinwa, and he is the host of the Medicine Shell, which teaches the ancient spirituality, philosophy, and cosmology of the Igbo people. Also the founder of Kedu.me, which teaches traditional African medicine and the Igbo language to the diaspora. He was here with us last week. You demanded that he come back, and he has answered the demand. He has answered the call. Duru, my brother, welcome. Thank you so much for coming back to the forum.
Always an honor. Thank you very much for having me. Thank you very much for anybody who requested I come back too. It's an honor.
It's a whole lot. It's a whole lot. So thank you so much. But we probably should ask you to, and I'm taking you by surprise. My father always says when him get up to preach in the church, it says, do not lay hand on any man suddenly. But here I go. So can you do for us, or say for us, an Igbo prayer before we go into the...
You asked the perfect question.
Thank you.
I was going to ask you if I can say something, if I can do something before we begin, right?
Wow.
I brought my tray and everything, and I'm going to pick everything I'm going to do before I do it.
Let's go with the libations. Yes.
The timing is perfect, right?
Yes.
So what I'm going to perform is a prayer called Iwa Oji. Iwa Oji, right? The importance of Iwa Oji is that you must do Iwa Oji with the native kola nut of West Africa. We call the Oji. Now, why? It is said that in the beginning of time, humanity came from the source of all things, which is Obi Chukwu. Obi Chukwu. The word Obi Chukwu translates into the home of Chukwu and the heart of Chukwu. Chukwu being the creator of all things. And before we came, we chose something from Chukwu's garden that we will use to remember where we came from, which is the source of all things. And what we chose from that garden was the Oji, right? The Oji is the kola nut. It represents the heart, just like Obi Chukwu. It represents the togetherness of the source, people, spirit, and their ancestors. Okay? So anybody who is holding the Oji is speaking to and behalf of all those things. So it's no small thing. Okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to perform the Iwa Oji prayer for everybody. Okay? Okikeke ruwa. Alawala. Ala nne mmadụ na nne mmụọ, ala na-enye ndụ na-enye nke ọma dị n'ụwa. Ụmụ gị abịala. Eji m ọjị n'aka na-ekele ndị eke, ndị orie, ndị afọ na ndị nkwọ, ndị mgbu na ndị egede, ndị mmadụ na ndị mmụọ. Ọjị nke ga-enye anyị ndụ, ọjị nke ga-enye anyị ike, ọjị nke ga-enye anyị ụzọ okike kere ka anyị gaa n'ụwa. Otu a ka ọ ga-adị na eke, na orie, na afọ, na nkwọ. He said, all right.
That was too short. But
I didn't know if the sponsors were going to come on, so I said, let me go ahead.
that is resonating still at the spirit level. Thank you so much for that, and that you came ready for it. Thank you so much. Where do we go from here after that now? So well, let's go straight to spirit, which is where we left off. And what you said to us about spirit last week, still resonating with a lot of us too. How spirit is viewed or seen within Igbo and Akan cosmologies. But you also said there really isn't any difference apart from maybe one simple, which is critical in itself, but pretty simple. So remind us of what spirit is, and then we take it from there.
Absolutely, yeah. So in Odinala is the phrase we use to say Igbo spirituality and cosmology. In Odinala, right, the universe was created by a mother and a father. The father being the Chi, that is the conceiver and the source of all things, right? So the best way I can explain, the best analogy I can use to explain the Chi is if I have the idea to write the book, right? The idea itself is the Chi. The book that gets created is the Eke, right? And then the mother is the Eke, the physical form, the universe, right? These two things, the conceiver of the universe and the universe, come together and create all things, right? But they don't create all things and then there's a distance or we have to go somewhere to find them, right? Just like you are 50% your father, 50% or roughly 50% your mother, you are 50% universe, right? They say that the human being is created with all of the dust of the stars, everything that makes up the stars in the universe, you're also made of. Everything that made the earth itself, you're made of the earth, right? If anybody wants to argue that, that's their business. That's just the facts. And then you are also create 50% that which conceived it all, right? From the beginning. Whatever it is, whatever name you have for it, you are 50% those two things. So as you are walking, you are a living, breathing representation and manifestation of the creator. So the creator is always with you, and the creator comes in two, right? The mother and the father are always with you, right? And this goes into the ancestral understanding of spirit, right? Now we have two terms. We have a term for spirit called moi. Moi is the unseen side of yourself, right?
Hold that thought for me. So they do. So the moi is.
Yes, moi is your spirit, right? You can translate moi as your spirit. It is this aura around you that cannot be seen or sensed with the five senses for ordinary people. Some people do have the gift of being able to see it. Right? You'll meet people, 1 in 100 people will say, I can see the light around a person, or I can see the color around a person. This thing is known as your moi, your spirit, right? The word moi in Igbo is the word mo is me in Igbo, right? And moi is just the big me, the full me, right? So at all times you are walking physical, non-physical. The Igbo people have a saying that "Ebobula nye kwadoro, nye ọzọ kwadoro n'akụkụ ya," which is wherever one thing stands, something stands next to it, right? At all times you have a physical you and a non-physical you walking in conjunction, right? But there's another element that a lot of people may not be familiar with, and this is your chi, C-H-I. Remember earlier I said you are 50% creator, 50% creation, right? That 50% creator is a thing called your chi, meaning that in Igbo cosmology, the creator is infused inside of you. And every single person has their own specific relationship, definition, and understanding of who and what that creator is that cannot be shared with another person, right? If you get 100, doesn't matter what religion you claim, you get 100 people of the same religion in a room and tell them to describe God, they're all going to say different things. Well, our ancestors acknowledge why people do that, because there's an ilu that says everybody's chi creates just one, right? The proverb says, "Nenamo otu otu." Manaowu tuka Chineke, which means a mother can birth many, but the chi only creates one. So my creator created me unique in the entire universe. There's not going to be two of me, right? And the other person next to me, same thing. And so my understanding of the creator is a journey of understanding myself because the creator manifests through me.
This is in direct opposition to what Christianity teaches, isn't it?
Correct. So the big idea in Christianity, I mean, and we can really have a discussion on this, but the big idea in Christianity is that your chi is something that's distant from you and that you are not worthy of connection to. And if you follow my 10-step program or jump through my hoops or come into my building or listen to my words or read my book, you can then know your creator, right? Which makes no sense because I don't have to go to anybody to hear my own heartbeat, right? So why would I go to anybody else to hear my own creator? How could you possibly know my creator more than I do? You understand?
And what we're talking about here is the ancient ways of knowing, the knowledge systems of our African ancestors and of ourselves. We're talking about Igbo, we're talking about Akan, we're talking about our own knowledge systems. So what happened to move us away from that knowing, that way of knowing and that way of being? What are some of the drivers or the factors that impacted where so many of us now in terms of how far we have moved from our chi?
Absolutely, yes. So the way colonialism happened, especially in West Africa, I don't think the story gets told too accurately, right? And what I do is I research these things. I know it very well. The big idea they sell you is that the colonials came and were fighting their way through Africa and they were winning all these fights. That did not happen. Most of the time when they tried to fight, they'd lose, right? So in fact, the Portuguese were trying to fight for 500 years. It didn't work, right? That's why you don't see too many Portuguese colonies in Africa. The French and the British had a better idea. They were going to spread by way of their religion, because they knew that if they can get a small group within a community to be listening to them on a religious level, they can eventually make it so that that group controls that society by proxy. And so that is what colonialism really looked like on the African continent. It's these missionaries spreading, right? They'll come with, okay, we're going to offer this medicine or we're going to do this favor for you and that kind of thing. And then after doing X amount of favors, they get one or two children, usually children. By the time those children grow, they now engineer the situation so that those children become the leaders of that society. Once those children become the leaders of that society, or once the British and the French entrench themselves in that society, they begin the process of hacking away those things that made us who we are, right? Why? Because this thing that I just presented you about the chi, in all reality, it's a liberating concept, right? In order for me to know the source, I must look within myself. It is because it tells you that nobody else can tell you this thing. Well, that's an inconvenient thing for a colonial project, right? So you get groups of children, you miseducate them, and then you engineer the situation so that they eventually take over. This is why, till this day, we are struggling with puppet leadership all over Africa, because that was always the structure. Yeah.
It makes a lot of sense because when you think about how our people have come to view colonial values as higher values than our own values, colonial ways of knowing or knowledge systems as higher or more sophisticated than our own knowledge systems. So we are always kowtowing and giving way, deflecting to European knowledge systems. And that also speaks to our ways of knowing God.
Yes.
How do we talk to ancient knowledge systems? How do we teach our children about God, who God is and what God is?
So if you probably have noticed this as well, but there's an awakening happening, not just in Africa, but throughout the diaspora, right? People are realizing that they have been lied to. People are realizing that whatever direction that these people sent us in is clearly not for us. It is not working. It was never intended to work. right? So a lot of younger people are reconsidering, right? In order to pass this to your children, I would start by a few things. The first is you yourself have to live and understand the principles of your ancestors, right? We have ample resources available for a person to learn those things. My own channel on YouTube, The Medicine Show, but I'm not the only one, right? And then number two, begin to involve your children in this process. Now, what does involving the children in the process mean? I have 4 things I recommend. 1, learn the names and the stories of your ancestors. Now, and when I say ancestors, that doesn't mean you have to go all the way back to the continent. I'm talking about your mother, your father, their mother, their father, so on and so on and so forth. That's step 1. Step 2 is to learn this thing that I just did, which is the Iwa Aji prayer, right? What is the Iwa Aji prayer? The Iwa Aji prayer, all I did was I greeted my ancestors. That's all I did. I greeted them. I said, so and so, I acknowledge you. So and so, I acknowledge you. You can say good morning. However, it was that they were greeted in life, you will also greet them in death, right? So that you're walking in one with them, right? And make sure your children are watching you perform this, right? Every now and then, kids, if you force it too much, they'll rebel. So every, right? Number 3, ultimately, that group of children who the colonialists were able to convince to come to our side is because the colonialists promised them a better life than they already had, right? A better moral principle than they already had. Now, eventually, we all learned that that wasn't true, which is why there was the anti-colonial movement and so forth, right? But you yourself have to show that, no, this is what it is. That means you have to live in a way that your children can say, I want to be that person. You have to set an example, right? Because you can Iwa-G all day. If your children see you as unprincipled, undisciplined, unethical, unloving, whatever it is that you offer, they'll throw away, right? Whatever it is that you offer. Some millionaires have their children reject their inheritance because of how their parents represented themselves in life, right? And then, of course, the fourth thing is to approach this with humility and patience. You are not going to be an expert. You're not going to be an expert in day 1, week 1, or year 1, right? I myself, who is knee deep in what I do, I'm still learning things every day. Okay. So be patient with yourself, set an example for your children, involve your children in these ceremonies or as you do things. And then, of course, do the work of learning the names of your ancestors and their stories and how to greet them in the morning.
How important is language to all of this?
Yeah, language is important and not important at the same time, and I'll explain, right? So Iwa Oji, this thing I just performed can only be performed in the Igbo language. Now, why? Is because they say that at the very beginning, that this is the language that all of our people spoke, right? Now, on the African continent, we argue who came first and that kind of thing, and nobody wants to say that they came after this one and so forth, right? But we Igbo people, the word Igbo means the ancient people. The ancient people, right? There's a reason we say what we say. So what the Igbo people believe is that in the very beginning, that was the language we were speaking. So if I'm holding this tray, that means that I am speaking on behalf of and to not just my immediate ancestors, but my ancestors from the very beginning of time. And therefore, I must use their language to do that. If I'm holding this tray in this moment while I'm speaking, I am a living ancestor. Okay. Now, outside of Aji, outside of the Kola, right? Because it's a very Igbo thing. If you are greeting your ancestors, you will greet them in the language that they understand. So some of you may switch from conventional English to patois to Twi to Igbo. You may need to throw it all in there, right? And that's okay. That's okay. Or you may need to pick one and go with it when you do Iwaji, right? But if you're speaking to your ancestors, you're acknowledging your ancestors, you greet them in the language they understand. And sometimes that's not Igbo. Sometimes that's whatever it may be, right? So language plays a role, but it is not the end all be all for most things. It's just this specific ceremony, Iwaji, when you hold the Aji, when you hold the Kola, when you use that very powerful symbol, all right, and tool, you speak Igbo.
So when we talk about decolonizing spaces, obviously language is a part of that, but it goes beyond the language itself, because first, from just listening to what you're saying, it begins with thought, with what have you recognized about yourself, if anything, and what do you do with what you've recognized. But colonialism has done a number on so many of us that you just described the process a while ago, that one of the hardest things is to walk that back, is to correct the damage that has been done. When you think about how God is presented, the image that we see as Black people when we think of Jesus or God, so that we're knee deep in this process. But I've also heard you say that there is an awakening. Walk back a bit and talk to us about that awakening. What are you seeing?
Yeah, absolutely. So process, and the reason I wanted to tell the story of how colonialism actually, when people talk about decolonialization, oftentimes they start politics, right? This politician and so forth, right? But the truth was a religious thing, was a spiritual thing. The religious and the spiritual was planted in you. The virus will do its work. Okay, it will turn into, if the you've ever seen is the person you pray to, by the time you get a diamond contract or an oil contract, and then what room do you have to speak? So everything else is secondary, right? So the awakening, for example, my experience, I had a dream one day. So I had a dream one day that this tall old woman, and stern woman, and I'm looking at her, and then for some reason I need to look at my palms. I can describe what the dream meant in words, right? And so I started into this tradition that I grew up with, but it was always my family luckily never bought into the colonial hype of this before. And I started taking it seriously. I started messaging me. Hey, I had this dream. This woman visited me, visited by a python. They gave me this symbol. I had all these people all of a sudden they were brought to me, or they were brought to something similar, or something like that. And then as I'm posting, interesting. He said, had I made these videos 15 years ago, fight me, right? Because the main thing that turn the image of themselves into the image of evil, or own originality. They'll now say, okay, this person is a bad. 9% of the comments are positive. In fact, the only negative comments I ever get is, oh, you didn't pronounce. And I don't consider that negative at all. This 15 years ago would be different. And so that's interesting. So then I start, and there's all these videos that people are posting where the churches are panicking because young people aren't going anymore. Young people are going back to their traditions. Young people are going back to themselves, to their ancestors, to the point where, even in Nigeria, one state governor has tried to ban this ceremony that I'm doing. Right? He's trying to ban it right now. Now, 15 years ago, he wouldn't have had to ban it because there was already enough social pressure telling people not to do it, that would have regulated them.
Yes,
but that's not working anymore, right? And if you go to America, and I'm sure I've never been to Jamaica, I would love to come sometime though, but I'm sure it's the same over there. People are thinking, people are opening their eyes.
You are correct about that. And you have an open invitation. We wish you could come next Sunday to be at that event we're having with Muta. But we'll hold it for now. But yeah, you do have an open invitation. I really do. Let me interrupt you because I have to make an announcement, and it's important for our listeners, especially for our motorists. So traffic along the Elegant Corridor in St. James will be reduced to single lane in sections on Sunday, May 24, which is today, and Monday, May 25 from 6:30 a.m. to 5 p.m. daily. And this is to facilitate electrical infrastructure works related to street lighting. Motorists, especially persons traveling to and from the Sangsters International Airport in Montego Bay, are being asked to proceed with caution and to plan for extra travel time. JPS thanks you for your patience and understanding as it works to improve service to you. So once again, a public service announcement from the JPS: traffic delays on the Elegant Corridor in St. James. This will be reduced to single lane in sections, that is today, Sunday, May 24, and tomorrow, May 25, from 6:30 a.m. So that's ongoing now on the Elegant Corridor, all the way to 5 o'clock. And this is going to happen on both days to facilitate electrical infrastructure works related to street lighting. And you're asked, motorists, especially persons traveling to and from the Sangsters International Airport in Montego Bay, to proceed with caution and to plan for extra travel time. JPS thanks you for your patience and understanding as it works to improve the service, and we want the improved service after Hurricane Melissa, so be patient with JPS. 5 minutes after 8 o'clock, and we're talking about ancient African, indigenous African knowledge systems. That are somehow we found ourselves on the back foot for so long in defining ourselves as opposed to or within the context of the other, of the Europeans. So everything we think about ourselves is in relation to the European. This is where we have come. But the thing is that we are the ones with the ancient, with the African, with the indigenous knowledge systems. A lot of it have been stolen and repackaged and resold to us. But in the process, we begin to deny ourselves and deny our gods. I want to talk a little bit too about that particular thing of denial and because you have a structured system. You talk about religion, then you have education. And so that within that industry, there's a whole other set of indoctrination going on and has been going on forever. What are the options to the awakening ones or the awakened ones in terms of how do you begin to deal with that when you too are faced with bread and butter issues, but you have your children who are going through this system?
100%. So earlier I said, right, if you're looking for a place to start now by learning the names and the stories of your ancestors, right? And the same way your parents sat you down and told you about Moses and Noah and all those characters, those are the people you tell your children about. Because when you tell your children the stories of those people, right, good or bad, just tell them. Right? Not only will they know themselves, they will know what they have been through time. So as they walk into a room, right? They walk into a room with all of that, with their full selves. None of their feet are dragging, right? And it doesn't matter what the outside tries to tell them. they know what it really is. To tell you the truth, education, education is, if done correctly, it's one of the greatest things in the world. And the first step in doing it correctly is acknowledging that the real education happens between parent and child. The second one, peer to peer. And then the next one is institution and person, right? So you begin that process as you're learning, your children are learning with you, and never by force. Our ancestors did not force it, right? There's an ilu that says, or ilu is a proverb. A proverb says, a good market sells itself, right? Show them the good in what you stand for by standing for it in its originality, and they will answer. We don't do force in Africa, right? So,
I want to go back to ourselves as our people then, because we think and we're discussing this in terms of ethnicities and tribes, and I think understanding that is very, very important. So help us to understand the ethnicities and the extent to which we mirror each other or we are the same. And especially within the context of the Igbos, Akans. When you say Akan, you're talking about Jamaican people, right? This we know for sure. Also Igbo. I mean, the language is everywhere. But then we also have on the island a wider, and maybe if we go wider to say the Bantu cultures, which we have Hunu, for example, which is Unu is a word that is within the Jamaican lexicon. We say that every day, everywhere, 15 times. I think we're here this morning. I might have said it 5 times already since I've been here, which is to say, Ala we, Ala Unu. And then we have Ubuntu, and all of that coming from the Bantu cultures. So I want you to talk a little bit about the philosophies, that thing that hold us together. That we are speaking a language, we have it on our tongue, but we're not understanding the meaning of what we're saying in terms of the prescriptiveness of it, as opposed to how the descriptiveness, if you will.
Correct, yeah. So in my most recent video, I said that if you are studying or understanding one indigenous African knowledge system, in truth, you are studying them all, right? Because there's more similarity than there is difference, right? Now, as far as the ethnicities in Africa and that kind of thing, I want people to understand something. The ethnicities in Africa are geographical expressions, really, right? They're real. They're the realest thing on the continent, right? Mm-hmm. So the concept of, I'm from Nigeria, the concept of Nigeria is barely real, right? Somebody came and made that up. But me being Igbo, I've been Igbo for well over 10,000 years, right? And so forth. And I know a lot of Jamaicans say that I can't, but we know our people. We know your
Yes,
we know your Igbo people as well, right?
Yeah,
and
that's true.
And you guys have been Igbo for 10,000 years.
Yes.
Right? Mm-hmm. And so that is
we claim Bantu on here too, We claim Bantu.
And all of that, it's all in there. Yeah, it's all, well, of course. But I have to make sure we're represented. Yeah. So, but yeah, so we've been this. So that's the most original thing on the continent, or those concepts. Now, here's the thing, right? As you study one, you come to find, this is all really a continuum. And it's only geography that makes me think I'm different from this. I mean, there's a river between us. Yes. And after a while, maybe I do this and you do that, and we think we're super different, but we're really not, right? Give you an example. The word Bantu means the people, right? And we know that allegedly, the white people say that the Bantu migration started in Cameroon, which is very convenient. They did that conveniently. Because people who came up with that theory are South Africans.
Yes.
And it's white South Africans, and they were looking around. They're saying some of these Africans know how to use iron tools, and they use iron just like the West Africans. Oh, maybe they're from there, but they stopped at Nigeria, right? They stopped there because of the population of Nigeria. If they now say that the South Africans are connected to the Nigerians, they have a big problem, right? So they stopped at Cameroon very conveniently. Right. But I'll tell you why I say that, because the word Ba in a lot of the Bantu languages means the people, means people. Right? Igbo, we say Mba. And some places in Congo, they also say Mba. Some places in Zimbabwe, they say Mba. but the Ntu in Bantu means one.
Yes.
One,
Otu.
right? In Igbo, the word for one is Otu. Ntu, Otu. So it's a continuum. It doesn't end right there at that Cameroon border like the South Africans say. It goes clear to Senegal that we were talking, and beyond that we were talking about earlier, where you see these things keep coming up again and again and again and again.
Yes.
Now, this group of people, this was who was targeted during the transatlantic
Trading Africans.
yes, trading Africans, exactly. And so because these people were targeted, you know, they're encountering each other and so forth. Um, More or less, they're targeting these same people, and they're targeting the same people because these same people have the same characteristics, right? I know that if I get this type of African, they'll know how to farm. They will be able to endure the sun. They'll be able to endure labor. They'll be physically strong, that kind of thing. They know on a biological level that if I get a Senegalese person, an Igbo person, a Congolese person, I'm more or less getting the same general thing. So the other side, they understand that we're talking about the same people with different languages.
And that is proven in the research. Our own people who have done the research have proven that. And you talk about iron just now, and the that talent or that knowing of how to these are the people who were targeted. We just had a research coming out, published paper recently. We did some interviews on that regarding smelting and all of that, and how that fed back into the United Kingdom. And the patent was stolen at the end of the day. So yes, it's beginning to. It really does make a lot of sense. So I'm going to ask you a final question, because we have a very packed program, which is to say, how then, as we move from here, because the overwhelming call last week was on for us to talk about some of these issues, but also to focus on God and how God is viewed, and how should we view God. It's not easy to switch on and off like that. I know that. I'm from a family of Pentecostal Christians, so there's no turning. Almost everything that is African is evil, which you alluded to earlier on in the teaching that the Western Christianity has indoctrinated our people with. So the main question coming out of last week from a lot of our listeners, and I've asked you most of them, had to do with that whole situation. How do we view God, and how do we begin to arm ourselves with this knowledge so as not to, let me make sure I get it right, so as not to hurt relationships? And this is coming from listeners. It's a general question that I have put in one question. But hang on there. Let me give them, I kind of put them, in one concise question, which this is one, which is a lot of people fear that once you go down this line, you're going to be ostracized. You're going to cause harm in your church and to your people and so on. And these are not questions you can raise in the church. But well, let me just ask you. At some point, you have to consider truth, isn't it? And think about your own spirituality and your own spirit. But I understand that people are concerned about this. Your advice to them.
Absolutely. So the main, again, we're going back to that understanding of what really happened during colonialism, right? Thing number one, is indoctrination. What does that indoctrination look like? You create stigma, and you create a mistrust of self, a mistrust of community, and a mistrust of other people who are like you, right? This breaks the community apart, and then from there you bring the church, which then becomes their new community. So a lot of people are going to fear losing that community if they do this and so forth, right? But what we understand from the African sense is that true community is not based on opinion or what somebody believes, okay? It's not based on opinion on what somebody believes. Some things to consider, right, is one, approach this as your ancestors approached it. Your ancestors were not fanatical. Your ancestors did not reject the beliefs of others, even in the Christians and so forth, right? Those children who converted were not rejected, right? It was them that did it with the vice versa, right? And they were not, they did not see their belief system or their system of knowing the chi, because again, we all understand each and every person has their own understanding of their chi, and that's how it's supposed to be, right? So start with yourself, right? Make sure that you are not changing how you view your community. Ultimately, all African spirituality will lead you back to your family. If somebody's telling you that this is African and it doesn't take you back to your family, don't listen. Don't do it. I don't know if anybody's seen that Nature Boy documentary that has been going around making the rounds. That has nothing to do. That was a very European way of approaching things.
Good thing we haven't seen it on this end.
Yeah,
But we look out for it.
For those of you, yeah. So don't end up in this situation where you think that you have to cut yourself off from somebody and now going into shit and so forth, which I think a lot of people, especially in the diaspora, are susceptible to because that's all they've ever known is this fanatical, my way is right, everyone is wrong mentality, right? But again, show them the light of what you are doing. If your family and your community is seeing improvements in you as a person, right? And if you are really doing what your ancestors said, it is inevitable, right? If they're seeing improvements in you as a person, they will either come around or they'll start asking you the right question. Another thing that I want you guys to know is that every single person that looks like us has what I'm saying somewhere in the back of their mind, but they're scared. And so I've talked to thousands of people at this point that have asked me the same question. And they always say, oh, well, I'm worried about my mother, this, my father will say this, what about this person like that? And then they begin. And what they find is that they end up being commended for their courage in a way that they didn't expect. And then those people who they were scared of how they'll perceive them, all of a sudden start asking them questions and start, oh, well, this is how I see things too, and da 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 da. So you'll be surprised that even though you feel that the response will be rejection, I have seen with my own two eyes thousands of times. I talked to thousands of people. It has been the opposite, right? There's an
And so the question is, how do you, and I want to leave with this, because as you were talking, it came to me, you do this when you're studying in their own knowledge systems too, to ask, how do you know what you know? And I think we can use that for our own, our own spaces, because it comes from us anyway. How do you know what you know? I think when you go down that road, it begins to.
I have my system, but I'm going to give you guys the ancestral system, right? This also adds the previous question.
Yes.
The way our ancestors relate with the creators, we believe we are one with the creator. We're expressions of the creator, right? We're branches from a single tree that is the creator, right? Meaning that what we call your first voice is actually the voice of your chi. When you enter a room and something says, you need to get out of here, right? That's your chi. That's your chi. When you say, you know what, I want to go and get my master's degree, right? That's your chi talking. All that other stuff. Yeah, but you don't have time. Yeah, what about your kids? That's something else, right? That your first voice is your chi. And what Christianity does is it breaks your trust in your first voice, right? You were born with original sin. Don't listen to yourself, listen to the book, that kind of thing. So regain that trust in yourself, in that first voice, and you'll be on your way. Your first voice is also how you know whether something is true or not. And this is what I tell everybody. If I am saying something to you right now and it doesn't sound like the truth, don't listen to me. Okay? But I'm saying, because you inside, you know what is true.
Right.
I may not even need to use words to say it, but you know what is true. So we in the Igbo context, we understand that a person is born all knowing, all understanding, all being, because we are one with the creator. So when you hear things, right, you know what the other system does, it tells you you're unworthy, but I can make you worthy. So whatever if you hear that's not true, that first voice tells you that's not true, ignore it. because I have this paper and that paper and this paper and that paper and that kind of thing. So listen to my papers.
Yeah.
Okay. Trust your friend. Go ahead.
No, I'm saying listen to yourself, not your papers. I mean, that makes a lot of sense. So your first voice, which is, in the church they talk about a still small voice, but that first voice is you're saying that is your chi, and that's a voice you listen to. That's a voice of truth.
Yes, your chi is confirmed by nothing in Odinala, nothing in Africa is not confirmed by reality. Your chi is confirmed by reality. If you say my destiny is to be a footballer, but you're the slowest person you've ever met, your chi made you slow for a reason, and your destiny is not to be a footballer because reality says otherwise, right? So in listening to your chi is listening to your truth. Your truth manifests physically and spiritually. Okay. And now, as far as myself, my system, how I know what I know. One, I don't say anything that I can't confirm in two places. Personal rule I made for myself. Nobody else has to follow that rule, right? It's just a rule I made for myself. You understand? Because originally I started as an archiver. I wanted to archive these things because I knew there was a value in them, right? And so I used the Western academic, confirm this here, confirm that. I spoke to a Dibia. Dibia is you may refer them as medicine men, but they are traditional scientists.
I'm so sorry that we're out of time. We have just 30 seconds, but go ahead. Yeah.
No, I spoke to a Dibia, and the Dibia told me that all this paperwork is good, but one day you're going to learn where this knowledge is really coming from, and that's when things will begin. And eventually, I learned where it's coming from. It's within.
Thank you so much, my brother. Brilliant, brilliant as usual. Thank you for your time. Thank you for sharing what you know with us. Really appreciate it every time. By the way, there's so many persons who have reached out and they want to contact you, and they've sent me numbers and sent me emails and so on. I'll send them on to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
All right, our brother there. And listen, we are going to have him back. He's really open to be part of the process, and he'll be coming into Jamaica. Watch and see. He's also open to that. You heard him saying that. So we're standing by to have him do that. All right, back with you inside of the Africa Forum. This is Running Africa. And just was saying as we went to the break, good morning to Dr. Marjorie Fullerton, who has resumed her role as principal at Merle Grove High. Remember that the Supreme Court ordered her reinstatement in March, a ruling that marked a setback for the school board because this was what it was. And so congratulations to Marjorie Fullerton, Principal Fullerton. We are with you as always. We have said this in the space. We stand with Principal Fullerton. And after so many years, now to hear that she has been reinstated, although we're seeing some headlines calling for her to be paid. I don't know how that is going, but I hope it's going well for you, reinstated as principal of Merle Grove High School following this Supreme Court ruling. This was after a prolonged legal battle over her 2022 dismissal. She officially resumed her duties at a St. Andrew-based institution. Once again, congratulations, and we wish you all the best. Villanueva village in St. Mary, exactly in that cove, in that valley where the river meets itself. Next week, Sunday, from midday. And it's an event that is 582 Hertz and cultural and intellectual gathering about his philosophy, about his knowledge, his indigenous knowledge systems. And because what we're trying to do is apartheid, to break the back of oppression, to say, how do we begin to change the narrative and to shift the paradigm? Hence 582 live. So that Muja will be talking to us. I will be reasoning with Muta. Muta is going to be reasoning with me, but I'm asking the questions. And he's reasoning about his own philosophies, looking at life through his lens as a philosopher. I told him, Muta, the philosophies and opinions of Muta Baruka. And there's a reason for that, because we are talking about a way of being and how we can inject into the system positivity for our youth, for the family, just to say, how do we move from here? How do we go from here? So we have collective resonance when it comes to 5H2. We rise by tuning together. We're talking about deep reasoning. We're not necessarily thinking on the surface. We're thinking about where do we go from here and how do we go from here with the knowledge systems that we have. So these reasonings are designed as living exchanges where thought becomes active, communal, and transformative. The event itself is set in Renova Village, which I said before is rustic, it is natural, and it's deeply historic in terms of the history of that place. We're talking about the very first people, the Osteonoids to the Tainos. It was ground zero for the final battle for Jamaica between the British and the Spanish, and you know how that turned out. It became a plantation, and then we have our brother Garveyite and entrepreneur David Wilson reclaiming the space and reclaiming it for just these kinds of things that we're talking about. It is a space of positivity, it's a space of growth, it's a space of positive thinking, understanding that we can be that which we want to be positively. And so, and this is where the river meets the sea, as I said before. So we're going to be there next week, Sunday, May 31, Muta Baruka and myself, and the reasoning will be focused on Muta, his philosophies, his opinions, his way of being. It is in what we build, what we believe, and who we become together. These are some how we are foregrounding the conversation. 582 Hertz live from Renova Village. We really once again invite you to join us there at Renova Village from midday and until mid-afternoon. So we're going to be there until about 3-4 o'clock. So be there with us, right? We're going to, at some part in the conversation, when we have wrapped up the deep reasoning, looking through Muta's lens, his philosophies, his way of life, his way of being, his way of knowing, we'll be opening the floor to questions for Muta. You can see in the background, if you're looking at YouTube, the venue. It's a venue that you're looking at there in the background of the poster, which is exactly where the river meets the sea. All right, we'll tell you more about that as we go along.
Get more miles with Ruby's Ultratech. Fuel the difference for peak performance and maximum savings. Drive more and save more. The time by Ruby's Ultratech is
now 8:45. You're inside of the Africa Forum. This is Running Africa, and you would have been seeing online you'd have been seeing I'm seeing you both. Good morning, how are you? I'm seeing both of you now. All right, Sovereign Mac and Helen Mac, I know that you saw online a viral video of sisters swimming or trying to swim at Blue Lagoon. You know that happened to us when we went. And you know that we also had a video out to say we came to swim and they wouldn't allow us to swim. And when the minute I saw this video, I think it was posted by Jabem, I thought, no, I'm going to have to get behind this because they said this was no longer happening. But here is a situation where Blue Lagoon, which is a case that is now before the court because Jabem has taken the government to court regarding what's happening at Blue Lagoon, only to find out through that video that there are persons who had gone there to swim and were denied entry or denied the right to swim. They actually got there, were denied the right to swim. So we have Sovereign Mac on the line. Helen Mac, good morning. How are you doing? Looking bright and beautiful.
Good morning. Hello. Yes. We're doing well. How are you?
We're well, thank you. Thank you so much for joining us. What an experience. Tell me, was this your first time going to Blue Lagoon?
No, shockingly, we moved here about a year ago, And for the past few months, nearly every day, honestly, either Winifred Beach or the Blue Lagoon, we head over there really early in the morning, about 6 or 7 in the morning to do yoga. And then afterwards we swim. We like going very early in the morning. There's something, spiritual about connecting with the water very early in the morning when there's not many people around. So this has been something that we've been doing, that I've been doing for months. And the day that the video was shot was the same thing. It was about 7 a.m. I invited my friend and a couple other people to go swimming at the Blue Lagoon. I think we got there around 7 a.m. And then at about 8:30 is when the police showed up. And to my shock, because like I said, we've been doing this for months and have had no issues.
So I know we also have the video. I don't know if those on Facebook or so on are seeing it in the background. But what exactly happened when the police showed up? What did they say?
So they showed up, like I said, around 8:30 a.m. and they told us to get out of the water immediately. There were 5 police officers, one of whom had, I don't know what type of gun it was, but a really obnoxiously large gun. They're being very threatening, and they told us that we are not allowed to swim in the Blue Lagoon without the presence of a lifeguard. So before 9 a.m., we're not allowed to swim in the Blue Lagoon.
All right. And you're saying you would have, this is something that you've done over time, but now you,
Yeah.
could you, I know that on, the video has gone viral and there are a lot of comments and there's some persons saying, oh, well, what's wrong with that? I mean, why not swim without a lifeguard? The history of that place is not that though. Do you think that if the lifeguard excuse was genuine or they wanted you out of there?
No, and that's exactly what it was an excuse. They also said if we drown, then we can sue the Blue Lagoon, so sue the government. I think it was a complete excuse. They didn't ask if we could swim. I was a lifeguard for a few years. And we're all very experienced swimmers. I don't think you go into the Blue Lagoon not being able to swim. I'm sure there's some people that do that, but for the most part, I mean, it's a big, deep, wide body of water. You go in knowing how to swim. To me, it felt like they were restricting us. Like I have the privilege to be able, my schedule is relatively my own to decide when I work and when I'm not working. But for a lot of Jamaicans, that's not the case. For a lot of Jamaicans, their work time is 9 to 5. So it felt like to me, they're just trying to find loopholes to exclude Jamaicans, people from being allowed to swim in their own waters.
And we're looking at the video now. We can see how shocked you were. And your mom was there, of course. Mom, the big guns at Blue Lagoon, because I experienced it and I know how frightening. I was frightened when that happened with us there. And, I was speaking, but I was frightened. And I suppose for you too, what was it like for you? What kind of experience was that like for you?
Well, actually, Sovereign had walked down to, my daughter had walked down with her friends down to the Blue Lagoon. And I drove back in. I drove in a little bit later. I got there right at 8:40, I think. And as I was driving in, I could see the police getting in their vehicle, putting their gun away and driving away. And so as I walked up, I kind of saw, the video that you were showing. I saw it happening in real time. Sovereign was shocked. Her friend was in tears. There were guests as well, tourists as well that had joined them. They later on came and did yoga and stuff with us. And so they were all shocked. People were, the ladies were in tears. It was just shocking. I saw a little bit of it, but I heard so much. I've been going to the Blue Lagoon because where we live, we can walk there. So we walk down with our dog. We enjoy the beach so much. It's one of the very first bodies of water that I fell in love with coming to Jamaica just over a year ago.
Mm-hmm. And Sovereign, since then, I'm sure you must have found out that there is a fight, or probably you knew before that there's a fight now for access to the Blue Lagoon. What have you found out, and what's your thinking on that? Are you joining the struggle for access to the Blue Lagoon?
Absolutely. I think I was very naive, or there wasn't much I knew about Jamaica before I moved here. My grandmother is Jamaican, so that's ultimately why we moved here. But at first when I came here, I was like, oh my gosh, this place is paradise, how wonderful. And I was kind of shocked as to why so many Jamaicans, they leave the country and they never come back. I'm like, this place is so beautiful. Why would you not want to stay here? And then slowly, through learning, through building relationships with people here, seeing that less than 1% of the beaches are accessible to locals, it's shocking and it's disturbing. And it's disturbing most because I think we're in 2026. You think that the people here own and have a right to their own land because slavery ended hundreds of years ago, right? All of this colonialism ended hundreds of years ago. But you
No, it's
see
ongoing colonialism. And this is what you experience, ongoing colonialism. So,
yes,
there's an
yes,
appearance of it
yes.
ending,
It's
but
disguised. It's
yes,
disguised as
yes.
these time restrictions. And that's how I think that's how it's able to continue, because if you're not very aware of these things, it's like, okay, well, you're not supposed to swim in the ocean without a lifeguard. Like it makes sense. But when you look deeper, when you look in the past, when you look in history, you see how this stuff pervades.
Starts with something small like a time restriction, but after a while, there's also, when you're walking down into the Blue Lagoon, there's police on the right hand side. Why are there police? And they sometimes will interview you. They'll ask you, who are you and where are you coming? We have American accents. They don't disturb us. But I got here before my daughter did. I've seen them stop and accost Jamaicans, and turn them away as well. So in the middle of the day, during the time that they're open, it's wild.
So you're saying that even going down to the Blue Lagoon, that they are police officers?
Sometimes there's actually, if you walk down, there's a little, like a little stand, like a little security office, and there'll be 2 and 3 police officers there. Absolutely. Not every day, but I've seen it often.
And you're stopped. You're stopped when you're interviewed, literally.
Oh, yeah.
What are the questions you're asking?
Sorry, that day, the security stopped me and asked like where I was going or why I was going in, and I'm like, I'm here all the time. This hasn't happened with me before. Like I know all the other security officers, and there's usually no problem. And he wasn't going to let me in, and then I said, there's other people inside already that I'm meeting, and he was like, oh, you're with those people, and I was like, yes, and so he let me through, and so I don't know why that was the case, but I'm like, why is this what you choose to police when there's so many other atrocities going on here? Why are you not letting people who want to swim?
And I think that is a critical question. That right there is a bottom line. So what from now? Have you joined Jabem? And because obviously this is not just a Blue Lagoon. You're there in Portland. You probably recognize by now that there was a prolonged fight also for Winifred Beach that lasted years and years and years and went through the court, and there's still another fight coming, I fear, for Winifred Beach. So what has this changed you in terms of your activism and pointing you in Helen Sovereign into a particular direction as a young person, as a youth?
Absolutely. I feel very, very passionate about this and about what's going on. I post on social media. I have a little page where I usually post about like gardening and yoga and food, but I also studied journalism in college. And I feel like part of my purpose being here is to write and to speak out about these things that are going on, because I think I have, being American and also being on social media, I feel like I have a platform where I am able to speak out on these things without getting any backlash or getting much backlash that significantly affects my life.
Right,
so absolutely, I want to dedicate more of my time and more of my efforts to speaking out and showing up for causes like this, because it means the world to me. How are we as a free people not able to swim? It's crazy.
I can only echo your question, because that is one of the most critical questions that we're asking now. It's apartheid. It's apartheid on the island. Can you swim on any beach you want to? Can you go out late at night? Is there a sign saying that no blacks allowed? This is basically what it is. The sign is not there, but it is there in terms of how you're policed, just trying to get there, and the denial. Sovereign, thank you. Thank you so much, Helen, for raising a beautiful daughter. And where can we find you on the social media?
My Instagram is my name. It's Sovereign Azure. It's SOVEREIGNAZUREE.
All right. We look for you there. Thank you so much, my sisters. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for
Thank
your
you.
activism. Thank you for speaking to who videoed you, by the way? Who took that video?
Jabem.
I think it was
It
him.
was
Yes,
Jab-
he
okay.
works.
Down there.
Yeah, he works at the Blue Lagoon, and we see him all the time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because that was brilliant to literally record that, because without that, we would have been told so many other lies.
Yeah,
So I'm glad that we
absolutely.
have that on camera. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you both so much. Have a great day. Are you in Portland now?
Yes,
Yes,
we are.
we are.
We are so
Very-
jealous of you. Stay in your beautiful Portland.
Yeah, we'll be heading down to the beach shortly.
Yeah.
All right. Have a good one.
Thank you.
too, thank
You
you.
too.
Okay, take care. This is the situation, Jamaicans are denied access to a lot of the beaches, a lot of the spaces. There is no access. And you heard them say just now, well, they have American accents and sometimes they're let through because of that. But generally speaking, across Jamaica, this is the apartheid-like situation that we have. I wonder if I can find the Brian and Tony Gold, because I didn't carry it with me. But Brian and Tony Gold's, can you? Do you know it, Peter? Brian and TonyGold, can you? And I didn't even go to YouTube, but hopefully. Okay, so here, let me see if this is it. And I hope I don't have any ads coming up in the middle of the whole thing. So I need to move from jingle to there and to do this. We understand what they're doing at the AU. As a matter of fact, we have a serious problem with the Africa Union. Everybody's at the Africa Union. And the Africa Union has shown us, in a similar way the United Nations is showing us, that there really is a change to the rules-based order. And the Africa Union never quite got off the ground. The liberation has been taken out. France is in and out. Israel has observer status. And people are controlled. I don't know who built it. We heard that when it was built, they had... they found the building, the Africa Union building, they found spyware in it, right after it was built. And there's just so much coming out of the Africa Union right now that it's such a shame. They have not been able to significantly impact anything that's happening on the continent of Africa, apart from making way for the colonizers. Dr. Imani Tafari Ama is my next guest online. My sister is a Pan-African scholar activist. She's an author, educator with expertise in development studies, gender studies, and cultural memory. She earned her bachelor's degree in communication with language and literature from Caramak, the University of the West Indies, and later completed her master's in women development and studies and a PhD in development studies at the International Institute of Social Studies in The Hague, the Erasmus University. And Dr. Tafari Ama, she's here, has taught at the University of the West Indies, Mona. She has served as a Fulbright Scholar in Residence at universities in the United States. Her work explores issues of gender and racial identity, violence and liberation within African, Caribbean and Rastafari context. She's also a prolific author and opinion writer with several acclaimed books blending scholarship, activism, and creative expression. Imani, my sister, how are you doing?
As you would say, I'm well if you are well. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, I'm well, my sister. Thank you so much for coming. Your article in the, I think was it the Gleaner? Was it the Gleaner? Yeah.
It was the Gleaner, yes.
This is one of the things we want to talk to you about because, as usual, a brilliant article. Thank you so much for continuing the work, for writing, and for doing so well. Now, let me just tell our listeners a little bit about the article. Regional Humanitarian Ama, regional moment for Rastafari rights. But you've said so much. You said so much in the article. You wove and interwove the need for decolonization in describing what the ongoing issues are now pertaining to Rastafari rights. And I want to center that because it's an ongoing struggle. I know, speaking to members of the RMO, for example, having them in the space, that they have written to government ministers, not just one, and haven't even received a response. So tell me about the gist, first of all. Let our listeners understand what it is that you argued in the article, and then let's talk about the different elements of the article, especially regarding decolonization.
You know what struck me when I did the background research for that, after I spoke to Karida and other, who raised the issue from the RMO point of view. What struck me was Dr. Drew's response in Parliament in St. Kitts and Nevis. He's the Prime Minister, and he cried. He wept as he was making his speech, remembering what he had gone through as a child of a Rastafari mother. He talked about how his mother pulled him from school when he was young, because she said it was abusive for a Black child in the Caribbean to be learning things like Christopher Columbus discovered the Caribbean. When Christopher Columbus lost his way and came and found people living here, proceeded to brutalize and exterminate them and so on. You know the whole thing with the smallpox in the blankets, all of that savagery. Mm-hmm. And he talked about how Rastafari have suffered and that it has been too long for redress to constitutionally, legally happen, for him to take the initiative as the head of state to institutionalize protections against a community that has been systematically discriminated over decades.
And let our listeners know what you're talking about. A lot of us know, but there's some listeners who don't know what you're talking about. What happened in St. Kitts?
Okay, so April 21 this year was 60 years since His Imperial Majesty Haile Selassie paid a visit to Jamaica. So there was a big celebration as usual, but this year was also very special because it was 6 decades. Yes. And at the same time, just about the same time that this was happening, because it was on April 7th that the Prime Minister of St. Kitts and Nevis in Parliament made this moving speech and proceeded to unveil an initiative where he was making the announcement of legal protections being introduced for the Rastafari community to enjoy special protections under the circumstances that they had been extremely discriminated against by the state, by the society as a whole. You know, there's this cultural disposition to treat Rastafari as them nasty, dirty people. Not only in Jamaica, where Rastafari originated, but it has permeated the region because, as you were talking about earlier, the hierarchy that we inherited in terms of knowledge creation, knowledge production, even in terms of our capacity to imagine ourselves as being more than the inferior beings that we have been socialized to accept ourselves as. Mm-hmm. He looked into this systematic form of inferiorization, making you feel less than who you are, and decided as a head of state of the region to make a move that was to redress that. Mm-hmm. Well, the Minister of Culture, Entertainment and Sport here in Jamaica, Honorable Olivia Babsy-Grange, felt a little bit rattled by that, because he was presenting it as the first time that these protections were being introduced for Rastafari.
In the Caribbean?
She said, well, you know, Rastafari have had protections in Jamaica. The RMO in Jamaica, the Rastafari Mansions and Organizations conglomerate body, objected to that, to say, no, even if measures have been taken, like what happened for the people of Coral Gardens and their the community to enjoy some, let us call it reparations for want of a better word, that did not amount to the momentous step that the Prime Minister of St. Kitts and Nevis was making in terms of inscribing it into law.
Into law, yeah.
into law.
That was the difference, and I know that there was of course, even in this space, conversations, ongoing discussions about that. One of the things that you wrote about and you laid that out in the article and point to the RMO. You said the RMO further contended that Rastafari in Jamaica do not enjoy the same level of explicit constitutional safeguards outlined in St. Kitts and Nevis initiative for a community that has endured decades of marginalization. I'm not quite sure I'm hearing something. There's a disturbance, and I'm not sure if you're hearing it, but there's a disturbance on the line. Okay, so you say from the cutting of dreadlocks in prison, denial of entry to schools, to workplace discrimination, that distinction matters. How important is it, and you've made it, to make this distinction when not just responding, but when pointing out the need to move beyond the rhetoric and to enshrine Rastafari rights within within law?
When we look at the system, when we talk about a social system and an economic system, a political system, a religious system, all of these systems that interact and intersect in terms of how children are socialized, in terms of how they come to know who they are, and so on. What we find is that anything to do with being too Black is treated as not good, because until now we have an education system that privileges European knowledge. For example, let me use myself as a tool of analysis. I did history at A levels, well, some time ago, but not so long ago. I'm still alive. I did European history. I could tell you about the War of Jenkins here, about
that makes two of us. Some year war, the War of the
30 Years War,
Ottoman Empire.
all of these things.
Yes, I know. We did the same history.
We did the same history.
Yes.
It wasn't until I went to university and was walking up and down in among the stacks in the West Indian collection that I found out about the philosophy and opinions of Marcus Garvey. I did not have that in any of the courses that I took along the way.
Yes.
And that is remarkable.
Egregious.
Yes. Mm-hmm. And we still, to this day, don't have that formal exploration of, the gamut of thought that Marcus Garvey embodied. So why is it that I can go abroad and students in America know about Marcus Garvey in the context of the Du Bois and the Booker T. Washingtons and the Anna Julia Haywood Coopers and this body of thought that exists to legitimize our, we have to use a fancy word in Cabo, epistemology, the fact that we have knowledge, we have the capacity to produce knowledge. We have had that for thousands of years.
And this is a conversation we were having before, and I want you to, I think, it's interesting. I wouldn't intend for them to connect, but they really connect when we're talking about our indigenous knowledge systems, in that so our knowledge systems totally disregarded, discarded, and sometimes revamped and sold back to us. But even we ourselves, when you go into academia, dismiss our ways of knowing and our own epistemology. I use the same big word, but our cosmology is that we have a problem in accepting that reality. So that is coming from a place. All right. So within the context of what St. Kitts days, what Jamaica is defending, and what does it mean that the minister, one of the ministers with responsibility, Minister Grange, has defended this to say that Jamaica was first out. What does it mean for Rastafari, though? Because it seems to me as if she's saying this and she believes this and others are saying this, then there is a stalemate.
You talked earlier with your guests about how fundamentally we have to change the way we see the world, the way we educate our children, the way we think. And it is not just about that we-ness is not an abstract, It is our politicians, our leaders who, if you drill down into their brains, I can imagine, because their performance is what is I'm using as the indicators, that there are very few people in the higher echelons of our power system who are convinced that an African-centered way of being is legitimate and even more so than a British way of being.
So that again, Imani, you're saying there are very few people setting apart.
All right. You see the people them who run things in Jamaica, people who are in power. I don't know if I can count on one hand people who are Black conscious. Black conscious to the extent that Dr. Drew in St. Kitts and Nevis is looking through a lens that is empathetic to the common person on the ground, who identifies with the disadvantages that people who are from, let us say, inner city communities, who book upon curriculum in school that sharply different from how them live them everyday life, who experience schizophrenia on an everyday basis when people say them chat bad, when them open their mouth to express themselves, who do not have access to being critical thinkers and therefore future problem solvers themselves, because they are cowed down into saying you must narrow yourself up into this box that say English better than patois. For example, what happened in the parliament recently. So when you have people who are so aligned to the Britishness of things that they cannot even see the foolishness about if you touch the mace, because the mace is like when the man did pick the Aki in the Governor General yard.
Yeah.
Because you're not so that the boundaries.
I'm going to come back to the mace and the Governor General and so on, and the personage of the people who represent the British Crown, which means the imperial power on the island and the symbols and so on, what that is doing to our psyche. Let me take. And Dr. Imani Tafari Amma is with us online, and we're talking about specifically referencing an article that's published in the newspapers that she authored, and looking at just elements of the article because she's really put a lot of stuff in perspective. And Imani, just before we went to the break, you were talking about how the colonial symbols and representatives on the island Jamaica continue to perpetuate the oppressive structure, if you will, of the British monarchy, of the enslavers. So I wanted to pick up from there. You referenced what happened when the young man picked the Aki from the compound where the Governor General lived, and you talked about the mace and so on. How these representatives and structures continue to oppress Jamaican people.
If we could see everything as like a web, I love spiders. I absolutely love spiders. I think spiders are amazing. To have the capacity to make a web, to give us a metaphor for looking at how everything is connected. So to pick up from the Aki and the mace and the whole system, I would have to ask, are our schools really preparing students to solve Caribbean problems? Or are they really preparing them to migrate and to be service-oriented for the rest of their lives? Where is the autonomy and the self-confidence and the critical thinking that are the primary drivers of education? Do you see that? Well, if we are just basing how we teach our students on foreign curriculum standards and how we can contribute to the brain drain and how we can build out our tourism economy, to what extent are we preparing our people to be subordinate as they were brainwashed to be, as your guest was talking about the spiritual ritual. He was talking about how we were intentionally conditioned to be underlings and to not have a sense of, I can better myself in order to better my society, in order to be globally relevant, because I'm part and parcel of a great civilization. Now, when we, by the way, learn about slavery, not enslavement, it's about those people who were shipped over here. It's not us, It's not like I am my ancestor.
There's such a disconnect.
There's a disconnect.
Deliberate disconnect, yes.
And that's where the shaming and the undervaluing comes in. So if you hear somebody talking about an African, it's in a derogatory kind of way. It is a put down to say that man is an African, and worse, people like you and I who would change our names to identify as African, it looks like something wrong with them people there. So,
and to change our names by deed poll, since people are asking. Let me just say that deliberately. That we didn't just change our name by deed poll. You say in the article that in just looking at all of what was happening and talking about Christopher Columbus discovering territory and so on, you said that story points to a broader issue familiar across the Caribbean education systems. Across the Caribbean, education systems still carry strong traces of colonial thinking, often centering Europe while marginalizing African and indigenous experiences. For children in post-colonial societies, that disconnect can shape identity in profound ways. And when we say profound ways, what we're talking about, Imani?
Profound ways. And I'll give you an example. So when I was doing postgrad anthropology at UWI, I wanted to use Cheikh Anta Diop as a reference. And I was told, no, he is not accepted in the academic community the way people like Edward Snowden are. So you have to. I was actually directed away from that kind of literature. And I know that to this day, people who
this is serious.
Teach Blackness have a problem teaching Blackness. You don't have many courses at our local university that are directed at that language recovery that your brother was talking about, that memory of our, and even our immediate ancestors, because the notion of naming ourselves or even knowing our stories is seen as irrelevant to the extent that it is now normalized for us to be what we are not. So you'll have the police give a report about a man who was killed and he was of a bleached complexion. Now, when did bleached complexion become a part of our anatomy? And it is now, if somebody is going to matriculate into university, they're leaving high school, the passage is to cream your hair and look like a nice young lady. Even if we have pockets of natural hair revival, it is seen as somebody said to me, black now wear again. You have to look nice, and the niceness.
And what does looking nice mean?
Long hair that you.
The more European you look,
the more European you can look, and the browner you can be, not just phenotypically, but in terms of your whole self-presentation. So if you even watch online this dance hall video about women who, not dance hall, hip-hop video, Queen Latifah is one of the few hip-hop artists who maintained an African persona as a political gesture, because she recognized that people, in order to fit in and to be accepted, had to wear pink, yellow, blue, green, blonde, red, whatever hair, in order not to ruffle the feathers of the establishment that funds the institution. And we have to talk about economics in all of this, because when people don't see it possible to be given equal rights if they self-represent in a particular way, I mean, now it is very unusual. I've seen a 1 and 2 police women who have dreadlocks, for example. But that's not the norm. It has not been the norm over our lifetime. And we even know in our lifetime that Rastafari images have been used as target practice with the security forces. So even if they have evolved to not using the actual image, the sense of them particular citizens being not equal to the regular people who serving the status quo, it is still an understated approach.
And then
You have to have intentionality with educators to change this.
Because it feeds also into crime and violence in terms of how we see how the security, the JCF deals with the masses of the Jamaican people. And so there's a 2-tier or 4-tier policing system in Jamaica where the more and then there's also the uptown downtown concept. I know people are challenging whether or not that exists, but isn't Jamaica one of the most classist
it is
countries within the Caribbean, and then when you talk about colorism, that's also another level. Let me take a quick break. I'm online. Imani, we're talking about some, these are hot button issues. These are very serious issues that sometimes we do not want to talk about, we do not want to face, because if you face it, you're going to have to change it. And there's a lot of cognitive dissonance around whether or not there is racism in Jamaica. People are even questioning classism, but Jamaica, the nation is rooted, classism and racism rooted in this nation. Now, in terms of because we have just about 10 or so minutes, how do we, I know the article didn't go into much of it, but you do not normally tell people what to do in the articles. You lay out the problems and leave us to go figure it out. And you've done this again. But help us here to understand, because I see that you're foregrounding the curriculum. Education is important. How do we even begin to decolonize the spaces? How do we change these spaces?
Some people might think that when you say decolonize, you must dump English and dump Shakespeare and dump. That's not the point. What we're trying to do is to recover the confidence in ourselves, in our legitimacy, to go beyond the slave structure, to transcend the violence that is woven into our existence. And classism is violent, sexism is violent, poverty is violent, and the cultural trauma that we walk around with. These are post-colonial realities that are extremely violent, and the disruption of our family systems and our community structures and all of that. We cannot understand violence without looking at the histories of racism, capitalism, dispossession that is the norm for the majority of the population. And we have to, when we talk about fixing things, we have to look at the emotional wounding, that makes people think that if a man beat you, him don't love you, or for a man to think that if me can't get you, nobody can get you, so I'm going to kill you and kill myself. This kind of thing that has become normal in the society. The fact that you can't catch Kwaku, you catch him shot, so that the cycle of jungle justice, all of these are wounding mechanisms to make us go further and further away from who we are. So, okay. So one of my sisters taught at that school that is directly opposite Jose Marti, Crystal House. This school was donated by a philanthropist from foreign. She donated a pot of money to different countries. But the idea was to start the school from scratch. Grade 1 to grade 3 is what they started out with. And I think children now have matriculated and graduated and gone to high school. But it was to ransack the mechanisms that had been previously used to educate primarily the children from the inner city communities around Spanish Town. in order for them to know another sensibility, another reality, another valuation to their lives. So they could come into a space that was different from the zinc fence or the sewage system that now we're working or whatever, where they live, and have an oasis that was funded. So the kids got books, shoes, bags, food, the works. We have to invest in that recalibration of the system that we are now thinking is okay and normal, and realize that the fault lines are here because the earthquake is about to happen. The storm clouds are gathering. The hurricane is on its way. What Damian Crawford did was remarkable in terms of putting it on the table that, look, the jackass said the world on a level. So we have to overcompensate for those who are outside of the frame of reference.
Yes.
Again, to use myself as a tool, I worked at NHT on the inner city housing project when it was just coming into being. And we had to say, you have to have affirmative action and judge people in living in squalor by different rules than those who you have in the outer city, who have other standards or other indicators that you can use to say, okay, you're paid, you're this, you're paid, you're that, therefore housing should be a derived demand. No, if you live in squalor, then you should be housed. Because soon and very soon, you are not only a problem to yourself, but you're a problem to the rest of the society. And if it is that that could be used as a model to say, oh, but people have done it. It takes billions of dollars, but the model already exists to change the thinking so that you don't fight Saturday morning because the water not coming upstairs. No, you have your own water meter. You have to put the infrastructure of change in place, because talking about it is wonderful.
Yes.
But you're likely to be preaching to the converted in this space. How we take it further is that the policymakers who probably are listening to should get a moment of epiphany, a St. Paul on the road to Damascus realization that we have been doing it wrong. It's okay to say we make a mistake, you know. And that
the fact that's only 1.8%, under 2% of the monies that came in for hurricane relief was used tells me that nothing is getting through.
There's no political will there.
This is heartlessness that is indescribable. We don't have any words to name these actions or lack thereof.
And what it does, it demoralizes people who have been suffering, because the deepest form of colonization, you know, is when people lose confidence in their own ability to think and define a plan for themselves. And even when you look to the children who in COVID, after Melissa and whatever, fell out through the cracks of the education system. How do we restore their sense of entitlement? Because we're all entitled to food, clothing, and shelter. We're all entitled to that.
Basic rights, basic human rights.
And if you don't have that, and you know, I've done a lot of work in the cities, and people will talk about ghetto steak. Ghetto steak is chicken back. Ghetto steak is what people uptown feed them dog. So you have to look at the language of survival and the language of resources and the language of ability and inability, exclusion, and those who are part of the 1% to say that, yes, we live in an apartheid society. We don't call it. But if you don't have the assurance like what Crawford is talking about, that you will have access to education, even if your mother don't have any money, even if your parents have no money, but the state will guarantee. When I work in foreign, it's because I pay taxes that my child get to go to school. I was amazed. In Europe, in America, If you are working and paying taxes, your child has to have the right to go to school.
But we pay education tax here, isn't that so? And you still don't have a right. And
You get what you pay for or what you don't pay for.
It is said that the right exists, but in practice, it really doesn't exist. And these are, I think, we're going to have to move beyond, as you're saying, the talk, because I think a lot is known, and there are many people in different places like yourself and Crawford and many others that I've spoken to who know and can help to begin to make the change. But if we don't, because, I've been having this conversation for 35 years in this space,
Noted.
35 years.
Noted. So it means that we have to talk about whose knowledge has historically been centered and whose has been marginalized, who is relevant and who is not. How do we make sure that when the education minister is sitting down with the finance minister, they get it?
But it seems to me as if there are other considerations which include what we sign off on and what we sign on to, whether it's Bretton Woods institutions, IMF, or bilateral arrangements with the European Union and so on, because it has to be something like that that requires the state to deprive its citizens of basic human rights. This couldn't be the same people and where we grew up with who I'm just saying, it has to be.
I'm just saying, because if we know that that's what those institutions are about, because they were not formed for our benefit. The Bretton Woods institutions were formed at the end of the Second World War to rescue the economies of Europe. But they figured out along the way that, we can charge countries like Jamaica 44% if we make them pay a loan. So that just the other day, 65 cents out of every dollar was going to pay this loan. So if we have $100 and only 35 cents out of the dollar is used for us and not to pay that debt, first of all, we should, as we used to campaign in the 80s, cancel the debt as a political necessity, because our labor has already paid the debt, historically speaking. And there's legitimacy to call for cancellation of the debt because of the benefits to the countries who are the architects of those institutions.
But we're getting deeper and deeper into that. The deputy director of the IMF was just the other day the finance minister of Jamaica. He's lauded as one of the best, and we are deep, we are knee deep now in debt again, and we seem to have a very close relationship with the IMF. It is there's so much to talk about, and I really want to continue the conversation. You know how it is. We'll call you back and continue this. But in the meantime, thank you for continuing to air these issues in the public spaces in the newspaper. Where can we find the article again? It's a Gleaner.
In the Jamaica Sunday Gleaner. It's in the In Focus section. I write every 2 weeks.
It's a brilliant article, and it's much wider. I know we zoomed in. We started wide with what your overall theme, but we zoomed in on one paragraph that you wrote there that point directly to some of these issues that we're talking about. So thank you so much, my sister.
Appreciate
Imani.
you and all that you do. Thank you,
Tabu. Thank you so much, Dr. Imani Tafari Amma. When you think about it, you wonder, where do we go from here? Chaos or community? It's just one of those things. We continue to pay attention, though, and we continue to do our best in the spaces that we exist in. Once again, next week, Sunday, we're going to be at the New River Village in St. Mary. Deep conversation, deep reasoning with Mutabaruka. Professor Vereen Shepherd will be there. She'll be opening the series, because it's a series of 5H2 HZ live or HZ live. It's a frequency, it's a change, it's a shift in the frequency. We're talking about energy, vibration, frequency, energy, and vibration, understanding what that is. And we're going where the river meets the sea. Going to be having a very, very deep conversation with Muta Baruka on his philosophies, his opinions, and we're doing this because we want to inject in the space a change in the way we see things, a change in the way we operate, a shift from the negative energy. Jamaica is vibrating on very low vibrational energy, very low frequencies we are vibrating at, and we want to shift that. So Professor Vereen Shepherd will be there with us, Mota Baruka, of course, Dale Haslam. Dale Haslam is the one of the guitarists, or one of the main guitarists now, with Ernie Ranglin, and he will be there. Also, he'll be carrying some of his music students because we're going acoustic. So the energy is really, it's a frequency shift. We think that when you inject positivity into negative spaces and focus on the positivity, leave every space you find better than you found it, every space you go into, then you begin to make the change. We talk a lot about what's happening in our country. We talk a lot about the crime and the violence, and we focus on that. And sometimes we find ourselves with all different kinds of ailments, and that's why we went 5H2HZ live, 5H2 frequency. I know Akinsani has asked if it's 528, and Akinsani, I know why you asked if it is 528. Good, very, very good question too, by the way. And it could be either. It's more or less the same thing. But we deliberately chose 5H2 to say that we're making, we're doing what the Harlem Renaissance. We hope that we're thinking within the concept of and the context of the Harlem Renaissance, of spaces where people changed. Start by changing the thought, changing the thinking, changing the conversations, and not just talking, but also doing. So at Renova Village, where the proprietor there is our brother David Wilson, who shows us, and this is a point we're making, through his own action, that whatever you think you can achieve, and this is a process, what you think, and Mwalimu Marcus Mosiah Garvey has said that to us, it is the thinking, it is your thoughts. And one of the things that we're going to have to do, no matter how difficult it is to begin to change our thinking, because we can be trapped in this low vibrational situation that's going on here in Jamaica and find ourselves at the end of the day just being cast aside, as so many have been already. But we're going to make the change. We're going to make the change in our thinking. So thank you, Professor Vereen Shepherd. Thank you, Muta. Thank you to Dale Haslam. And there are many others who are coming in from different schools. Ryan Simpson, let me know if Belmont Academy has confirmed. But we're doing it. It's a family event. When we're finished talking to Muta, we will take questions for Muta. We invite you to be a part of the event. All right. You know what I have, Peter? I have a lot of... all right. So I do have a lot of messages. Thank you. So let me go through. All right. So Dr. Devon Taylor says, the Portland Municipal Council state that we have no prescriptive rights to the Blue Lagoon, and the trial in Portland, the Portland Parish Court, will be on June 3, June 19, June 22, 24, and 26, and September 28, 29, and 30. So mark those dates down. All right. Isis say, yes, change our thoughts. Isis, really looking forward to seeing you on Sunday, my sister. All right, Roots Rockers Reggae Dub Session, Africa Liberation Day Celebration, Reasoning by Bongo Jerry Small, Monday, May 25, that's tomorrow, 7 p.m. to midnight at Nation Lounge. Admission is Love and Light, Forward and Full Joy. So Bongo Jerry Small will be Reasoning, Samurai will be there, Carbon the Hard One, Black Spirit, and Johnny Clark. So that's May 25. That's tomorrow, African Liberation Day. All right. Elaine, who is in the UK, She says, in the UK, you don't need to pay tax for your child to go to school. Every child has a right to go to school if they are living in the UK. And she says, also, we need to think about equity, not equality. What Dr. Imani says about putting structures in place for people with different circumstances. She's agreeing with that. Also, let me go to Moylene Samuels, who says, Blessed Rising. Sister Kabu, I'm listening to your program regarding Blue Lagoon's swimming case. I stomped away from farming, fixing and cleaning to enjoy a couple of days at one of those soon all private-owned beaches in the Grill 2 weeks ago. And she said she was alone. And okay, so it's a very long text, so thank you, Moylene. I'll read through this and see if I could get to the... It's very long, Moylene. What good, my sister, I saw that. All right, Andy Lumsden, thank you, Andrew. And Andrew has been texting throughout the program. He says, amaze the language and the people, by the people, for the people. Oh, yeah, I should talk about Ebola. I know I have to talk about, and there is one more thing before I go to Ebola. I'm trying to find it, and I know that has to do with, thank you, Yefine, who's listening from the United States, Kwame McPherson, my brother. And there's one more thing, and it is Boniwela. I know, I can't find it as Asadenaki. Let me see, Asadenaki. I'm not seeing you. Okay, Naki Wela. Where did I put that info? All right, so justice for Sister Jean Watt, Raleigh, Naki Wela, Warrior King, and Aisha Candy. Dr. Knife, Carice Lawrence, moderated by Colleen Douglas on Sunday the 24th. That's today. In the Yard, 5 p.m. to 9 p.m. In the Yard, 6 St. Andrew Park. All right. Justice for Jean Watt. That's Bunny Whaler's wife, who disappeared during COVID and has not been found since. And that's happening today in the Yard. All right. The Ebola situation, I know that they are trying very hard to find a pandemic X. But Ebola is very serious. Ebola is a serious thing. It's nothing to joke about. This is not flu. This is not COVID. This is really one of the serious illnesses. And now we're hearing that it is spreading. They say it is spreading. If they want it to spread, they will allow it to spread. And I'm not quite sure where they're going with it. I hear that in the DRC, the death toll has now surpassed 200 and odd, and that efforts are continuing to deal with the outbreak. The DRC, it's interesting how they're covering the Ebola outbreak in the DRC in particular, because there's no mention of the massive, massive genocide that is underway in the DRC. There is a massive genocide in the DRC that is killing thousands of people per day, per week then, hundreds of people per day. No mention of that, but Ebola is killing, as it is now since the outbreak, just over 200 people. And that is making every single headline. We have to understand what time of day it is, It has made every single headline. Ebola is really a dangerous disease. But in the DRC, hundreds of people are killed per day. And this is true. They say it's civil war. It's not. It is mercenaries who have injected themselves there. The UAE is involved in so many places on the continent of Africa, stoking war. The old colonizers are there stoking war. And there's just so much happening in the DRC because of minerals, rare earth minerals. And hundreds are dying per day. It is what it is. But yet, there is a wall-to-wall coverage about Ebola. In the DRC, was it now 5 days since they announced? It was 7 days because it was Sunday morning that the first announcement was made. And there are over 200 deaths, but it has made every single headline in every single country, in every part of the world. 200 deaths from Ebola because they're up to something. They want another pandemic. What about the thousands of people who are raped viciously until they die? The hundreds of people who are being killed in the DRC daily as we speak because of rare earth minerals. That is another conundrum. That's an enigma wrapped in a conundrum, wrapped up in a riddle. I don't know what to do with it. But this is the reality that we're facing right now. So this is a situation, Uganda, Ebola, and we understand that it has spread to 5 other countries on the continent of Africa. So there's a whole lot of conversation going on about that. Now, at the same time, in the Sudan and in the DRC, there is a genocide underway that is being stoked by others, especially those who are working on behalf of whether it is wider Europe or the United States. And I'm speaking about the UAE. The UAE. So what we do with that is going to be up to us eventually. They're now developing a vaccine for Ebola. They might be rolling it across the world because they're going to tell you that you have to take it because it now spread to the US because there was one doctor who was somewhere and you have to make a big deal of turning him away from America and the plane have to go land all the way in Canada and you have to put him in a glass casket and then everybody have in a hazmat suit and then you carry him go in a hospital and you make a big deal of that because we're rolling out a vaccine and everybody have to go take the vaccine. Thing about Ebola is that we cannot play with it. So I don't even know what to tell nobody to say. I wouldn't stand up here and say don't take the Ebola vaccine, but I'm not taking no Ebola vaccine. That is just it, right? But this is a situation. This is what we're facing. The Project 25 spoke about a pandemic X. The United Nations talk about a pandemic X. WHO talk about a pandemic X. They need a pandemic X to go into the New World Order. And they are searching for it. It was hantavirus and it just never took off. Now everybody talking about Ebola. I don't think this Ebola thing going to take off either. Because you can't do and you cannot do. Right? I rebuke you. Anyway, this is how I say goodbye for today. Mr. Bigay is in the house. By the way, thank you so much, Raspadation. I have your book in hand. I saw you this morning. Behold Rastafari, Roots of an Indigenous Jamaican Cultural Movement that is Changing the World. This is Raspadation's book, and we're going to be reading this, right? And then tell you what we think about it. How you doing, Mr. Bigay? Graduation time again? I know, it's our time. You know nobody in there this year? Nephew, cousin, niece? So you're forking out the monies? You're forking out the monies. Did anybody listen to you? Are there any changes? It's getting worse, it's true. It's getting worse. I think it's a feel-good thing, I don't know. But this is a situation. This is what we are faced with, and this is what we are going to continue to have. I invite you next week to the Renueva Village. I did send you the little thingy. Renuevo. Deep breathing with Mutabaruka. Yeah. Yes, you just didn't call me at all. I suppose. Oh, please. Well, yes, true. I did. Yeah. 582. You say, sister, I'm not listening. You see how much time we spent on it this morning? Me not in a with them, you see how much time. Put it up on the screen. I can have a look at it. Yeah. Right. Right. Is that, well, you know, we say energy frequency. Right. So we've been through it. So you're right. So you're right about we probably need to have it up here because we've spent a lot of time on it this morning, but we can't put up back something so you can look at it. So, right. So basically, it's frequency. So it's energy. It's vibration. So we're always saying that we need to shift the vibration because we need to shift the frequency because we're vibrating at very low frequencies. Now you have 528 that everybody knows, right? Which is the frequency of healing. It's the very same thing, and it really, because it's the same. We don't add the numbers. If you flip them, it's really the same thing. But it goes beyond just, and it's newer. So people call it New Age. It's newer than what was originally recorded, like